Hello everyone, welcome to the first section of this course. In this section, we're going to be taking an overview of the application that we're going to be building. We're going to be setting up our Flutter project, installing all of the required dependencies, setting up the config file that is going to hold all of the sensitive data for our application, and we are going to be going to the actual API website and generating an API key for us and actually understanding what the actual structure of our application is going to be. So with that, I'm going to end this video here, and I'm going to see you guys in the next lecture where we're going to be actually taking a look at the application that we're going to be building. Thank you. Hello everyone, welcome back. In this lecture, we're going to be taking a quick overview over the application that we're going to be building, and after that, I'm going to be showing you the actual website from where we're going to be pulling all of the data that's being displayed here. So without anything further to do, let's get into it. So before getting started, I'm going to tell you that this application that we're going to be building is going to have a single page, and this page is going to be responsible for showing us some results of a list of movies that we're going to be pulling dependent upon the various criteria that we have. So what are these various criteria? Well, first is going to be the criteria that we can search for movies that might have a keyword in their title. So I'm going to search for Wonder, for example. And if I click on enter, you're going to see that it's going to pull the API, and it's going to pull up a result of all of the movies that have the name or the word Wonder in their title. And it's going to provide us a list of that, as you can see. The second thing that we're going to have is that we're going to have a category-based system of pulling down movies, and that is going to be two categories actually, which is going to be all of the movies that are currently popular. So if I click on this multi drop-down and click on popular, you're going to see that it's going to return a result of all of the popular movies that are currently being shown. And then if I click on upcoming, it's going to show me all of the upcoming movies that are bound for release. Another cool feature that our application is going to have is that we are going to have pagination built into our application. So if I scroll through the end of the list, it's going to pull down more results. So if I go to the end, it's going to pull down more results, and it'll keep doing that. Apart from this, we're going to have one other essential feature, and that is going to be updating the UI dynamically. And the way we're going to do that is when somebody clicks on one of the movies, it's going to change the background at the back. So if I click on Godzilla vs. Kong, it does that. Breach, it just changes that. Little things, it changes it again. So that's something that we're going to be doing as well. To achieve all of this functionality, we're going to be using the REST API that is going to be provided to us by this website, which is called the moviedb.org. And to get information regarding the actual API, you can go to developers.themoviedb.org. I'm going to be introducing this website in later sections, and we'll revisit this quite often to actually see all of the different information that we required for pulling the different data that we required from the API. So now that we have a quick overview of the application that we're going to be building, I'm going to end this video here, and I'm going to see you guys in the next one. Hello everyone, welcome back. Now that we've had a thorough overview over the application that we're going to be building, I think it's prime time for us to actually begin the application development process. So to get started, what we'll do is that we'll create our Flutter project in this video, and then we're going to also test to make sure that it actually builds and launches onto a mobile device. So without anything further to do, let's get into it. So the first thing I'm going to do is that I've already navigated to the folder where I'm inside of my system, where I'm going to be placing the actual source code. And once I'm inside of the specified folder, so for Mac users, you can use terminal to do the command that I'm going to be doing. And for Windows users, you can use the command prompt or PowerShell, making sure that you have the Flutter SDK installed, is to do Flutter create, followed by the name of the application, and I'll call this Flicked app. So just in a cool startup-y way, I'll just remove the E from the Flicked and kind of name it like something more amazing than Flicked, I guess. And once this is done, what you're going to do is that Flutter is going to go through the process, create the application for you, and then it's going to give you the instructions for how to run the application. We're not going to follow these. The first thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to show you the version of Flutter that I'm running. So if you're having any kind of issues while coding along with me, you can actually at least rule out the fact that maybe the different Flutter versions might be an issue. So yeah, I'm on Flutter version 2.0.4 and on the stable channel. So now once this is done, the next thing I'm going to do is that I am going to open up the folder where I have created my Flutter application. I'm going to copy it over into my code editor of choice, slash like lightweight IDE in this case even, and that's going to be Visual Studio Code. Now before we can actually take a look at what we need to do with our actual Flutter project, what I'd like to highlight is that if you want the VS Code IDE to have like some kind of different tools so that will help you with Flutter related and Dart related development, I'll highly recommend that you go to the extensions panel and then install the official Dart code extension. And once that is done, just restart your IDE and then you should be good to go. With this, you'll have the ability to actually run the simulator, spin up different simulators and things like that. So now I'm going to stop my actual terminal because we don't need it anymore, and I'm going to click on this bottom left panel where it says Chrome. It might say something else for you, and this is the actual device that your Flutter application is going to spin up on once you click like the run button and then start debugging. So I'm going to click here and I'm going to select start an iOS simulator, and I'm going to wait for the simulator to spin up. And once the simulator actually shows up and is ready for me to actually start debugging on it, I'll resume the video. Okay everyone, so the simulator is up and running, and the last thing that we need to do is that we have to go here. We're going to click on the run in the top section, and we're going to click on start debugging, and from there I'm going to select Dart and Flutter for the environment type, and now we're just going to wait for the magic to happen. So you should see in your debug console it says launching the main.dart file on iPhone 12 or whatever simulator that you have. So that should be the name of the device that you're running the application on. And with this, I'm going to wait for the Xcode build process to done for the app to actually spin up on Flutter, and then I'll resume the video again. Okay, so now the actual application is running on the device and it's actually working. As you can see, I press the plus button and it does things. So now the final thing that I'd like to do is that I'd like to make sure that the actual hot reload functionality of Flutter works as well. So I'll go to the main.dart file, and inside of the actual Flutter demo title that we have for our material app, I'll replace that and I'll call this just Flutter. Do command save, and I'll also go down where it says the my home page and the title for the my home page, and I'll call this flicked, and hopefully that should change it. The actual title be displayed here on the top bar. So since that happens, I know that I've successfully set up my project and it's running on the simulator. So with that, I'm going to end this video here, and I'm going to see you guys in the next one where we're going to be setting up the actual dependencies for our pubspec.yaml file. So thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video, we're actually going to be setting up our dependencies for our pubspec.yaml file, and these are the dependencies or the different packages that we're going to be using to actually develop our application. So there aren't a lot of packages that we will be using, namely there are just three. The first one that we are going to be using, and the place that we're going to be putting these packages to be installed is going to be under dependencies. Just be sure not to put them under dev dependencies, because then these dependencies won't be included in the actual release build for your Flutter application. So here, the first thing that we're going to be adding is going to be Flutter_riverpod. So that's the state management library that we're going to be using, and the version that I am going to be showing you guys is going to be 0.13.1. Once we have this, the next thing we're going to do is that we're going to add DO. So DO is going to be the HTTP client that we're going to be using to actually send the different HTTP requests to our actual API. And then finally we'll have getIt, which is going to be a package which is going to allow us to actually access singleton instances for different classes that we have defined inside of our application. And we're going to have the version 6.0.0 for it. So with this, I'm going to do command save, and hopefully the Dart extension should recognize it and do Flutter pub get automatically. But if you for some reason don't get that, just go to terminal inside of the folder where you have the actual pubspec.yaml file and do Flutter pub get, and that should produce the same results. So once we have this, the next thing we can do is that we can go to our actual main top level folder, and here we're going to create a new folder, and we're going to call this folder assets. And inside of this assets folder, for now, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create two new folders. The first one is going to be a folder called config, and this is going to hold all of the config files that relate to our application, and this is where we're going to kind of keep all of the sensitive data that's inside of our application separate from the application code, so that when we actually push our changes to a Git repository or things like that, we can exclude this specific file and not let public eyes actually pry on secrets that we want to include inside of our application. And besides that, what we're going to do is that we're going to create a new folder, and that folder is going to be images. So as the name suggests, we're just going to be keeping some static images in here, which we might be using through the application development. And for our case, we're going to be having only one image, that is going to be the actual image that's shown on our actual splash screen for the application. So inside of the config folder, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a new folder or a new file, and the file inside of the config is going to be called new main.json. So I'm going to do new file, and I'm called main.json. Inside of our main.json file, we're going to have 3 new keys, and these keys are going to be API_key. So this is going to be the actual API key that we require to interact with our API. I'm going to leave it empty for now, and we'll fill it later on. The next is going to be our base_API_URL, and this is also going to be empty for now. We can fill it for now, but I'll actually show you the location where you can get this from. And then finally, the last thing we're going to have is going to be base image API URL, and this is also going to be empty for now, and we can do command save. Now the last thing we need to do is that we have to go to our pubspec.yaml file, and inside of our pubspec.yaml file, we have to actually tell Flutter to actually load the asset folder in and actually make the files available to the actual Flutter application. So to do that, we'll go down to where we have this asset section. We'll alt comment it by doing command / / and from there, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to change the first import to be assets/config /. So this means everything under the config folder. And with this, I'm going to do assets/images. So everything under the images folder, include that as well. I'm going to do command save. I'm going to rebuild our Flutter project by doing restart to make sure that everything spins up and I can see that the app still runs. So with that, we've successfully set up the dependencies for our Flutter application. In the next video, we're going to be actually going to the actual MovieDB website to actually obtain our API key. And I'll also show you from where we can actually get our base API URL and base image API URL as well. So with that, thank you for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video, we're going to be actually obtaining our API key, our base API URL, and our base image API URL from the API that we're going to be communicating with to actually get all of our movie data from. And the website that we're going to be using is going to be called themoviedb.org. Keep in mind that you will have to register an account with them, but getting an API key is free. So with that said, let's show you the process of what you have to do. So the first things first, you're going to register an account with them. That's instantaneous, verify your email, and you should be good to go. So once you're logged into the website, you're going to click on the actual profile that you have, and you're going to click on the actual settings section. Once you've clicked on settings, it's going to take you to this new kind of folder where you're going to go down to where you have API listed, and you're going to click on the API. And inside of here, if you go down, you're going to have a request form where you can request an API. I already have an API key. It's blurred just for security purposes, but you're going to copy this API and you're going to go back and you're going to paste this in for the API key and do command save. So once this is done, the next thing that you're going to do is that you are going to actually go to the primary documentation where you can have detail about all of the different endpoints that you can interact with, available at developers.themoviedb.org. And here, I'll just wait for the page to load. At the top, you're going to see that underneath of this main title, it says https://api.themoviedb.org/3. So that's the main base URL for the API. And we're going to copy this. So I'm going to copy link address. I'm going to go back and I'm going to paste that in for our base API URL. And don't forget to add the 3 at the end. So that is done as well. Now, the last thing that we need is going to be our base image URL. And for that, you're going to click on this section under getting started where it says images. And here it's going to give you an example of the different ways that you kind of link together the actual image name that it gives you along with the size of the image that you want alongside the URL. And in our case, we won't be like tinkering with this a lot. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to kind of like get the base part of the URL by just going to one of these, copy the link, going back to our actual base image API URL and then pasting in it. And then at the end, I'm just going to remove the actual ending image name here and just leave the base image API URL at that. So this means that whenever I add a name to this URL, that's going to form a completed URL, and the size for the image that I'm going to be receiving is going to be the original size of like the poster size that image has, and we don't need anything other than that. So I'm going to do command save. And one thing that I'm going to mention to you before I end this video is that the API request form will take some time to be reviewed and then accepted. So keep this in mind before you actually start developing the application, that there might be a delay between you submitting the form and the relative authorities at the moviedb.org actually going over your application and approving it. But 99% of the time, everybody who sends a request gets approved. You can just type in why you need that API key, the same way that I did for educational purposes, that I'm following a YouTube tutorial, and they'll give the API key to you as well. So with that, thank you for watching, and I'm going to end this video here. I'm going to see you guys in the next one. Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video, we're going to be taking a quick overview over the documentation that is provided to us by the moviedb.org, and we're going to be just going over some of the actual endpoints that we're going to be using to pull our data from. So without anything further, let's get into it. So the first thing that we're going to be doing is that we're going to be going down to where we have our movie section, and we're going to be clicking on it. And then from here, we're going to be using the two endpoints that are provided to us. The first one being get popular, and then so that's this one, as well as get upcoming, and the upcoming would be this one. For get popular and get upcoming, the actual response is the same, but if you want to like later on in the course, once you're finished with it, you want to extend the functionality of the app further by including other endpoints, you can actually read about all of the requirements that they have on the actual individual endpoint documentation. So for example, if apart from having popular and upcoming videos, I would also want to get the ones that are similar, I can just click on get similar, and it'll provide to me like you have to do /movie/ the ID of the movie that you want similar movies to be provided to /similar, and then it'll tell you what type of response you can expect, in if you have a 200 response, if you have a 400, if you have a 404, and then inside of your actual response, what are each of the fields and what type of results do you expect from them. So this will help you tremendously in your actual development process. Secondly, another thing that I'd like to talk about is that regardless of whatever endpoint you use, the way that the images are returned. So if you remember, we copied over the base image API URL, and the reason we required that is because when we are going to be getting a response from the actual API regarding whatever endpoint that we hit, and if there is a image that is provided to us, it's going to be provided to us in a way that we're just going to get the path of the poster. As you can see here, for example, in our get popular, we're just getting a poster path, and this poster path is just going to be the string of the actual image, a name, followed by the extension of whatever. So is it an SVJ, is it a PNG, is it a JPEG, and that's all we get. And we'll take that poster path, and then what we'll do is that we'll take our base image API URL, we'll take that, we'll append our poster path to it, and that'll give us the complete URL, which then we can give to a widget like, for example, network image inside of Flutter to actually pull the image from. So with that, I'm going to end this video here. Now you know where you can actually go and find all of the different documentation or resources that you require to actually interact with the API. I'm going to see you guys in the next one. Thank you. Inside of our course. In this module, we're going to be building the splash screen that you see when we actually initially open up our actual Flutter application. So in my case, if I open up a completed version of our Flutter app, you're going to see that this is the splash screen that I am talking about. And the reason we require the splash screen is because we have some certain things that the application needs to set up before we can actually present the user the actual user interface for actually interacting with the API. And to do that, the best way that I found was to actually show a splash screen. In the background, we can do different kind of things, such as initializing our services, maybe loading all of the data from our main.json file, which has all of the secrets and things like that, and making them available throughout the application. And that is one of the reasons as to why we require our splash screen. And once all of that initialization is done, then it's as simple as just going to a newer screen and then having the ability to now navigate the application and kind of do all of the stuff that we'd like to do with the app. So with that, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to end this video here. I'm going to see you guys in the next one, where we're going to start building our actual splash screen and then integrating it into our existing Flutter application. So thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video, we're going to be getting started with actually building our splash screen for our Flutter application. But before we can begin, what I'd like to do is I'd like to give you a quick overview over the logic that we're going to be using to actually build our splash screen and then navigate on over to our actual home screen. So the way this is going to work is, instead of having two different screens, we're going to have two different applications that are going to spin up inside of our Flutter application. And the way it's going to work is that we are going to firstly create a new splash app, you can say, which is going to show our splash screen, and then it's going to do all of the initialization stuff inside of it. And as soon as it's done with that, what we're going to do is that we're going to remove that application and create a new Flutter application by using the run app function that is used, and we're going to spin up a new application. So I think that it's something that sounds unconventional, and you might want to just maybe import a package that already gives you access to splash screen building abilities, but just keep in there and just keep following, and I am sure that by the time we're done with this module, you'll have a really good understanding of how we went about doing all of this. So now that that is said and done, let's get into the process of actually building our splash screen. And keep in mind that this is going to be a longer video, so I might break it into two videos, but for now we can just begin. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to our main.dart file, and I'm going to remove all of the code that's in there, which for the myapp class, and I'll just keep the actual void main function. So before we can actually do something in the void main function, what I'm going to do is that I am going to create the actual splash screen class. So I'm going to call class splash screen, and then I'll call this extends, and we'll call this stateful and widget. And what I like to do is to keep the naming convention the same across of the application. Instead of calling this a splash screen, I'll call this a splash page. And then I'll do stateful widget, and then I'll just kind of open up the class. But I forgot one important thing, is that we should always organize our code. So what I'm going to do is that inside of our lib folder, I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this folder pages. Inside of the pages folder, I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call this file splash_page.dart. And then inside of our splash page, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to actually create our splash page class. So I'll put this in, and then at the top, I'm going to actually add my actual import for the material package for Flutter. So I'll do import, and then I'll do material dot and import it. So material.dart. So now that we've created the actual stateful widget class for our splash page, I'm going to actually define a attribute, which is going to be final void callback. And what is this going to do? Well, this is going to be a function that is going to be passed to our splash page, which is going to be called once all of the initialization inside of our splash page is done. So I'll call it void callback on initialization complete. And then what I'll do is that I'll define the actual builder function for our class. So I'll call const, and then I'll call it splash page, and then it'll take in two named arguments. The first is going to be a key of type key, and then the second is going to be a required parameter, and that is going to be this dot on and then on initialization complete. And then with that, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to do a super method. So I'm going to call the super classes base method by doing super and then passing it key, and then key, and then doing Alt-Shift-F command save. And for now, I'm getting an error, as you can see, for our class, which says the splash page, since it extends stateful widget, needs to implement the create state function. So I'm going to quickly create the create state function, and then I'm just going to remove the actual implement create state comment, and then underneath of the actual class, I'm going to create the actual state class by calling it splash page. So just name it correctly, splash, and I don't know why I can't type splash page state, and that it extends state of type splash page. So this is just the basic concepts of Flutter. And then from there, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to open it up, and then I'm going to create the build method inside of this. And for the build method, for now, what I'll do is I'll just return null, and then I'll take this splash page state, and instead of throwing an unimplemented error, I'll return our actual splash page state. And with this, what I'll do is that I'll do command save, and I'll remove this underscore here as well. And I do not know why it's giving me an error. Oh, yep, I see. Splash page. I actually didn't name them correctly. So now everything should be good. So we have our actual stateful class splash page. We have the create state method defined for it, and we have the build method defined for our splash page state class, which is the corresponding state class for our splash page. And we've also defined the actual constructor for our class. So what this constructor does is that takes a key and then a required parameter, which is onInitialization complete. And then this onInitialization complete is going to be a function that gets passed to it, which is going to be called once we're done with initialization. And then we call the constructor function for our actual base class. So with this, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to do command save. I'm going to go back to our main.dart file. I'm going to actually import this by doing import and then /pages/ and then we'll have splash underscore page .dart. And oh yeah, and we don't need to do we can just do slash pages. So slash pages / splash underscore page .dart, and then we can do command save, but it's giving me an error. /pages, yeah, that works. And then inside of here, instead of doing run app, what we're going to be doing is that we're going to be running our splash page. So I do run app, and then inside of here, I'm going to call splash page. And then I'm going to, before I pass the onInitialization complete, I'm going to pass it a key by doing key unique key. And then I'm going to pass in our actual onInitialization complete function. And inside of here, for now, what I'll do is that I'll just do null, and then I'll just add the corresponding trailing. And let me see what the issue is. If I remove the actual, it says that expected a semicolon here, and it expected a semicolon as well. Yeah, command save and then add a comma here, and we should be good. So with this, I'm not going to run the app. I'm going to end this video here because this video has become quite long, and then I'm going to see you guys in the next video. We're going to continue building our splash page. So with that, I'm going to end this video here, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you. Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video, we're just going to continue building our splash page. So in the previous video, we had built our splash page actual stateful widget class, the corresponding underscore splash page state class. And now in this video, what we're going to be doing is that we're going to be defining the build method for our splash page state. So that's the method that is going to be responsible for actually building our actual splash page. So let's get going. So the first thing I'm going to do is that inside of the build method, I'm going to return a new material app. So we're not returning a scaffold, we're returning a material app. I'm going to give it a title, and I'll call this flicked. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to give it a theme, and the theme is going to be of type theme data. And then inside of theme data, the only thing that I would like to define is going to be the primary swatch, and I'll call this colors.blue. And then I'll do Alt-Shift-F to reformat the code so it's easier for you guys to read. And then following that, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to define the home attribute for our material app. The home is going to have this thing called a center widget, which centers everything in the middle of the screen. Because if you remember, if I actually close our app, so just let me close our app and run it again. the completed version, obviously, that we have this logo in the center. So we're going to achieve that by doing center. And then inside of here, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to have a child. The child is going to be a container. The container is going to have a height and a width. So height of 200, width of 200. And then following that, the container is going to have decoration, and the decoration attribute is the attribute that is going to allow us to get the ability of actually displaying an image. So I'll say the decoration is of type box decoration. I'll do Alt-Shift-F just to reformat the code, and then inside of here I'll define the image attribute, and the image is going to be decoration image. So define that, and then the decoration image is going to have a fit. So the fit just means how the actual image fits inside the container. We'll have to do boxFit.contain. That's the one that worked the best for me. And then finally the image, and this image is going to be of type asset image. So we're going to be loading it as an asset. So we're going to be providing a path, and the path is going to be the complete path. So that's the assets/images/logo.png file. I'm going to do Alt-Shift-F, and I'm going to also add the trailing commas because that helps with the formatting. I'm not going to do Command Save. Now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to my assets folder, then the images, and inside of this I'm going to actually drag and drop my actual logo.png file. So I'm going to copy it over, and you can get this from the GitHub repo, and I'm going to paste this in. So just give me 1 second to actually locate the actual logo file, and once I've located it, I'm going to drag it in. So I take my logo.png file and I put it into our images folder. So now it should be available as well. So once we have this, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to my main.dart file. I'm going to make sure that everything looks good. I'm going to go to our test folder. I'm going to remove the test folder because we don't need any tests. So just remove it. And then I'm going to now run our application, fingers crossed, and see how it launches. So I'm going to let the build process go. I already have the simulator running, and once the application is up and running, I'll resume the video. Hello everyone, welcome back. So as you can see, the actual simulator has spun up. Our app is actually running on the simulator, and we're stuck on the splash screen, and I can re-verify that by just restarting our app, and you're going to see that we are just stuck on the app screen. So I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you. Hello everyone, welcome back. In this lecture, we're going to be creating the other page for our application, which is going to be the main page of our application. And that is going to be the page that we're going to transfer over to once the initialization is completed inside of our splash page. So without anything further to do, let's get into it and let's see how to do that. So to get started, inside of my pages folder, I'll create a new file. And for this file, I'll name it main_page.dart. Once that is done, the next thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a class inside of here, and this class is going to be my class responsible for actually generating the main page. So I'll call it class main page, and then it extends, and it's going to extend a thing known as a consumer widget. So we would do like stateless widget or a stateful widget in general use cases, but we are going to actually instead or extend upon a consumer widget. And for now, just understand that this consumer widget comes from the actual Flutter Riverpod library that we have actually included in our pubspec.yaml file. And inside of this class's build function, it's going to provide us another argument that we require, which is going to be a scoped reader. So that's all you need to know for now. And when we actually get to the point of actually using Riverpod and consumer widgets, as well as providers in general, we'll have a much more detailed talk on what this consumer widget does. But for now, just understand that for our build method, this actual consumer widget actually passes in another required argument to us, which is a scoped reader. And to get access to the scoped reader, you have to import the Flutter Riverpod package with the IDE did for me automatically, but that's something you have to do. So I'll call this scoped reader, and by convention, you call it watch. And once this is done, what I'm going to do inside of here is that I am going to return a function, which is going to be called _build UI. And then inside of this build UI function, inside of this class main page, I'm going to then create a function which I'll call widget, and then _build UI. And then what I'm going to do is that inside of this, I'm going to return for now an empty scaffold. And that's pretty much it. For the scaffolding and everything to work, I need to also import the material package, which was also imported by the IDE automatically, but I'm going to just kind of like organize my imports by putting these two under the comments of packages. So once this is done, that's all we need to do for our main page right now, because we just want to show a blank screen, blank white screen, nothing else. So I'm going to go back to my main.dart file, and inside of my main.dart file, I'm actually going to define how we're going to go from our splash page to our actual other app. So the way this is going to work is that inside of our main function, you can see that we have this function called run app. And this run app function, what it does is that it creates our splash page, and then it passes for the onInitialization complete a function to be called. Inside of our onInitialization complete function called that we're passing, we'll call run app again. So we're going to spin up another app, which in Flutter will disregard the app that was previously running. And inside of here, what we're going to do is that we are going to run our my app. So, or not my app, sorry. Inside of here, we're going to run our actual main application. But before we can get started by running our main application, I need to import the specific page. So I'm going to do /pages and then do /main_page.dart. Once that is done, the next thing that I'm going to do is that I am going to also define the actual class, which is going to be instantiated inside of a run app function. So I don't want to just like start off and instantiate just the actual main page class. I want some functionality of a material app provided to us by Flutter for my application, and hence I'm going to instantiate a new instance of a material app, and that's what I'm going to call my app. So I'm going to, underneath of the function, create a class, and I'll call this my app. You can call it main app, anything that you want, and it's going to extend stateless widget. Inside of here, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to firstly create the build method, and inside of the build method, I'm going to return a material app. So material app. And inside of this material app, I am going to now define some certain characteristics that our app requires. So the first one is going to be a simple one, which is a title of our application. So that's flicked. Following this, we'll have the initial root. So this means the initial root of the application, or the initial page that we're going to go to once this actual application is run. So keep in mind, this is the initial root that the application is going to go to once the run app is called on this class. And that is going to be our home root. So what's our home root, you might ask? Well, that's defined inside of our roots section, or the roots attribute for our actual material app. And that is going to be the key home, followed by the actual function, which is responsible for building the actual widget. So I'm going to call this build context, and then we'll get a context passed to us in the function. And what we're going to do is that we're going to return an instance of our main page. Once this is done, the next thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to define the theme. So the theme data for my application, so theme data, and then inside of here, I'm going to have two things. And I don't know why I added accent color, but it's going to be our primary swatch, which is going to be colors.blue. And then it's going to be our actual visual density. And visual density is going to be visual density dot adaptive platform density. So let me type it again, visual density dot adaptive platform density, and do Alt-Shift-F to reformat the code and Command save. And I can see that our main app is giving us an error, and that's because we're not doing anything inside of our run app. So now inside of run app, I'll tell run app to actually create an instance of my app and then run it. I'm going to add these trailing commas just to reformat the code nicely, and then I'm going to click on the reload function and see what happens. So as you can see, the onInitialization complete function is not called. And the reason for that is because we're not calling it anywhere inside of our splash screen page for now. So where do we call it? Well, we're going to call the actual onInitialization complete function inside of our init state function for splash page state class. So similar to how we are build function, we are also provided with an init state function, which is called init state. And we override this because this is a method of the base class state. And inside of here, we can do all sorts of things. For now, what I'd like to do is that I'd like to call the super.initState method, so the initState method on the super class. And following that, what I'd like to do is that I'd like to call widget, so that this widget keyword allows me to access properties inside of the parent class which this corresponding state class is for, and then access any of the attributes. And what we want is the onInitialization complete function, and then just call it. So doing that, doing command save and reloading my application, fingers crossed, we should see that the splash screen goes away, and then we see this kind of an error. And this error is because we're not providing any kind of provider scope. The reason for that is because we're using the main.page, or we're using the main.page file, inside of which we have the main page class, which extends a consumer widget. And since a consumer widget requires an access to a provider, or a provider scope actually, we need to somewhere inside of our build hierarchy of widgets include a provider scope. The recommended way to do this is to include it as a top level widget at the really start of the widget tree of our application, at the very top. And the place we're going to do it is by encapsulating our My App application inside of a provider scope widget. So you might ask, wow, sounds tricky. How do you do that? Well, it's fairly simple. All you have to do first is that you have to import Flutter riverpod. So Flutter _ riverpod .dart would do the magic for me. I'm going to organize my imports as well by adding a comment to it saying packages. And then for my app, I'm going to put that inside of a scoped, or not a scope provider, actually a provider scope widget. And then for the child, I'm going to have that be the My App, and then I'm going to add my remaining bracket, do Alt-Shift-F command save, reload the application, and you're going to see that now we're shown with a white screen. But if we reload, you're going to see that it's just like so fast that we don't even see our actual splash screen. The reason for that is because nothing's happening inside of our initialization complete function, so it's practically instantaneous, and because of that, we just instantly go to our actual screen. But we can fix that fairly easily. All we can do is that we can have like a delay timer of a second where it shows the actual splash screen for a second, and then it takes us. So we can kind of do like some kind of dummy waiting, if that makes sense, or like we can fake it. Like there's something happening. For that, what you can do is that you can do future.delayed and then pass in a duration object. The duration we want is going to be of 1 second. And once this future is complete, which is marked by the then method, we can actually do whatever we want. Since I don't require access to whatever value this future provides us, I'm just ignoring it by putting an underscore. And then I'm going to call the widget.onInitialization complete function inside of here, instead of calling it outside. And then I'm going to do Alt-Shift-F command save to reload the application, and then make sure that I reload the app. And you're going to see that we're showing the splash screen for 1 second, and then we go on to actually doing all of the stuff with the onInitialization complete. So with that, we've practically created our main page. We've linked our splash screen to our main page, and the basic control flow of our application is working, where we're going to our splash page first, doing some kind of dummy initialization, and then moving on to our main page. And the process of which we do that by is by first spinning up one app, which is solely responsible for showing us the splash screen, and then completely disregarding it, and then spinning up a new application, which actually runs our main application, which is encapsulated inside of a material app widget, which exists inside of our My App class. So with that, I'm going to end this video here, and I'm going to see you guys in the next one, where we'll continue developing our application and continue enhancing its functionality. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Hello everyone, welcome back. Now that we have the basic architecture for actually performing initialization work inside of our application before the main UI for our application is shown kind of laid out, I think it's prime time for us to get into the actual code and kind of code us the actual logic that's required to be set up before our actual application is usable. So what do we actually want to do in the initialization of the app when we're showing the splash screen? Well, what I'd like to do is that I'd like to take the data that's inside of our main.json file and make it globally available inside of our application for whatever classes, services, or other things like that that require access to it. And then also to set up some other useful services that need to be accessed globally, such as a HTTP service and some other services that we'll get later on in this course. So let's get into it and let's see how we can go about that process. So the first thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to my splash_page.dart file. And inside of here, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a new function inside of our splash page state class. And I'm going to call this function setup. This function is going to be responsible for actually loading up the data from the file that we have, which is main.json, setting up services and everything like that. So to get going, what I'll do is that I am going to, inside of this class, create a function which is going to be of type future. So this function is going to return a future, and this future is going to have a return type of void, and then it's going to call _setup. And then inside of here, we'll have a build context, and this is going to be called _context. This is going to be an async function. And why async? Because accessing the actual system file storage and then pulling out data from there is done in not constant time. And since there is a delay in that, this is going to be an async function where we're going to wait for the actual things to be done. So the first thing that I need access to is going to be the getIt instance, so the getIt package instance. And the getIt package is going to be the package that is going to allow us to register Singleton for different classes that we have inside of our application and then make them available to us. So what is a Singleton, you might ask? Well, a Singleton is just one instance of a class that is globally accessible and the same everywhere. So we're going to get started by defining a final variable, and we'll call it getIt. And then we're going to set it to getIt and then .instance, and then it might give you an error, and that is because you haven't imported getIt. So I'm going to go top to where we have packages. I'm going to import, and I'm going to do get_it.dart, and it should autocomplete the import for me. And now the actual error should go away. So once we have access to the getIt, the next thing that we need to do is that we need to import, or we need to load up the data from the actual config file. For that, what we have to do is that I'm going to define a variable called config file. I'm going to set that equals to await, and then root bundle, which is a system utility that Flutter allows us to access files from the actual system. And then from root bundle, I'm going to load the string. And what is this string going to be? Well, I'm loading the file, so I have to provide the path to the file, which is going to be assets/config/main.json. Once that is done, we should have access to the file. So now that I have access to the file, I need to get the JSON data out of it. So for that, what I'll do is that I'll define a new variable, call it config data, and I'll use a function known as JSON decode. And for this, what I need to do is that I need to import the actual Dart convert package. So I'm going to go to the top, and you'll see that Flutter automatically imported this for me, but I'll just organize it and keep it at the top, just because I like to kind of keep my imports all nicely organized. And then inside for the source, I'll just pass in the config file. So what this will do is that it'll take the data that's inside of the config file, and it'll try to decode the JSON inside of it, and it'll give it to us. And then it'll give us a dictionary where we'll have key value pairs, and then we can access the data. So now that we have this, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to get some structure to our actual config data. Yeah, I can just use this actual variable that's given to me, and I can just go in here and I can do config data, like config data, and then just do base_API URL, base API URL, and that should be well enough for my purposes, but I just want to follow some better practices. So I'm going to actually create a new class which is going to model the data that's present inside of our JSON file, and we're going to actually use that class to actually obtain the data that we require. So for this class, since it's a model class, I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call this model, and inside of the model folder, I'll create a new file, and I'll call this config.dart. Inside of the config.dart folder, what I'm going to do is that I am going to actually create the class. So I'll call this class and then app config. And then I am going to, inside of here, define the 3 actual attributes that we need access to and that are present inside of our main.json file, which is base API URL. We have final string, and then we have base_image_API_URL, and then finally we have final string, and then we have API_key. And then I'm going to define the actual constructor for our class, and this constructor is going to take in all of these three attributes. So dot base API URL, this dot base image API URL, and then this dot API key, and then Alt Shift F, Command Save, go back to my splash page, go to the top, import my actual model. So I'm going to do import /models/ and I'm going to rename the actual file from actual config to app_config, just to be have the same naming scheme as the class that it presents, and then do app_config.dart. And I do not know what the issue is, so let me do the import again, /models or models/ and then app_config.dart. And I already saw what the issue is. The issue is that the folder name needs to be models and not model. And then we are good. So once I have access to the app config model, I'm going to go down, and what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a new instance of our app config. And then I'm going to use getIt to actually register this as a singleton. So I'll do getIt, and then I'm going to do .register singleton. And inside of register singleton, what I'm going to do is that I am going to instantiate the app config class. But before I can do that, what I'd like to do is that I'm going to define what type of singleton I'm registering, and I'll call this of type app config. And then I'm going to, inside of this function, instantiate the actual app config. So I'm going to do app config, open brackets, and then inside of here, I'm going to provide the actual arguments that are required. So the first one is going to be our base API URL. The second one is going to be our base image API URL, and the third is going to be our API key. And then now I'm just going to take our config data, and I'm just going to kind of paste in. So base API URL, config data. We can do here, we can do base image API URL. And then for the API key, it's the same way. So config data, and then we access the API key. And with this, I'm going to add the comma. I'll do Alt Shift F, Command Save. So once we have the actual setup function defined for now, and we'll add more functionality to this in the upcoming videos, I'm going to call this function, and then once this function's initialization is complete, or this function's working is done, we'll call the actual onInitialization complete function inside of our widget. And this is really simple to do. All I need to do is that inside of my future.delayed, I'm going to copy my function call. I'm going to comment this out because we don't need this anymore. We don't need a delayed future. And then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to call our underscore setup function. And inside of our setup function, I'm going to pass in the context, and then .then. And once the setup function is done, I'm going to just disregard the value that's get passed in to us, and then I'm going to do widget.onInitialization complete, do Alt Shift F, Command Save, add this trailing comma just to make everything look nicer, reload the application, and make sure that everything works. And as I can see, everything is working since we're getting no errors. So once this is working, you're going to see that the splash screen is not being shown at all. And it's not because the setup function is not working. It has more to do with the fact that the actual time that it takes to actually load the file in and kind of do all of those things that are in the setup process is so fast that we don't see the actual setup screen or the actual splash screen, and it goes fairly fast. So to kind of like counteract this for now, what I'm going to do is that I'll still keep the future.delayed function, and inside of our future.delayed function, I'm going to actually call my setup function after a second. And once that is done, inside of that, I'll call my initialization complete function. And this will be a massive UI/UX improvement. And now you're going to see that we first do the 1 second delay, then we do the setup, and then we finally call our onInitialization complete, in which takes us to our actual My App, and then that takes us to our main page. So with this, I'm going to reload the app for one last time, make sure everything works. So with this, we have successfully added the ability inside of our application to go fetch the data from the main.json file and made it globally available in our application through the getIt package that we're using as a singleton. And in the next videos, we'll keep further developing the functionality for our setup function and keep enhancing the logic of our application and adding services that we're going to require later on in the development process of our application. So with that, I'm going to end this video here. I hope that it's been useful for you. Hello everyone and welcome back. In the last video, we had created the logic inside of our Flutter application to actually load up our config file and then create a Singleton instance for our app config class so that it's available throughout our application for things that might require access to the specific config information that we have inside of main.json. So similar to that, what we're going to be doing in this video is that we're going to be creating first our HTTP service, which is going to allow us to interact with the REST API by sending GET requests. And once we're done defining our HTTP service, we're then going to be registering it as a singleton using the getIt package in the setup function as we had done beforehand. So without anything further to do, let's get into it and let's see how to do it. So to get started, what I'll do is that inside of my lib folder, I'll create a new folder and I'll call this services. And inside of services, I'm going to create a new file and I'll call this http:/service.dart. Once I have the http:/service.dart file created, now comes the time to actually start coding the service. So I'm going to create a class. I'm going to call this http service. And then this class is going to be responsible for actually handling the logic of sending requests. The first thing that we need is that we need access to the actual HTTP client that we're going to be using, and that is the DO client. So I'm going to firstly go to the top and I'm going to import the actual package. So I'm going to add the comment here for packages, and then I'm going to do import do.dart. Once we have the DO package imported, the next thing that I'll do right now is that I'll import the getIt package as well, and it'll become apparent later down in the video as to why we need getIt, but just import getIt as well. And finally, I'll import the actual config model as well. So I'll do .models/config.dart or app config, sorry. So now that I have the app config model imported as well, I'm going to create a variable inside of my HTTP service, which is going to store a reference to our DO instance, and I'm going to instantiate a new DO instance. Once I have that, I'll also create another final variable. I'll call it getIt, which will store a reference to our actual getIt instance. So I'll do it getIt.instance. And I'll define the type for it as well. So it's getIt. And once we're done with this, we're ready to actually define these two new variables that are required within our class. That is going to be our base URL for the API, which, if you remember, now is present inside of our app config model that we've instantiated, and our API key, because every request that we send to the actual MovieDB API requires the API key to be present in the query string as well. And once we have this, I'm going to create the HTTP service constructor for our class. And every time this class is constructed, what I'll like to do is that first I'll like to get the app config. So I'll do app config_config equals to, and I'll do the getIt variable that we have, and then I'll do get. And then inside of these triangle brackets, I'm going to do app config, and then I'll add the remaining circular brackets, and we should be good to go. So what this will do is that it'll ask the getIt package to get for us a class of type app config, and then it'll put that in the config variable for us to access. Once we have this, what I'm going to do is that I'll set the base URL equal to _config dot, and then as you can see, base API URL. And then after that, I'll do API key equals to _config dot, and then we'll do API key. So with this, then we can do command save and we can move on to the next step, which is going to be creating the actual function that is going to be responsible for sending a GET request to our actual API. So this function is going to return a future of type response, and this response class is provided to us by DO. Then we're going to have this method being called get. The method is going to be provided a path. So this path is going to be everything that is followed after the base URL, not the actual whole complete URL. And this path would not include the query string. For the query string, what we'll do is that we'll have a optional argument of type map, which will have string, comma, dynamic, and then it'll be called query. And then following this, what I'll do is that I'll make this function an async function, and then I'll open up the function body using curly brackets. Now here, what the first thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to use a try catch block, and inside of my try block, I have to first build the complete URL to send the request to. To build the complete URL, it'll be really easy. We'll first need the base URL, and then following the base URL, we'll tag on the path. So I'll do underscore path. So we'll have the base URL, which could be, for example, in our case, google.com, if I'm making a string. And once we have the main URL defined, we're going to have a /, which we'll add to the path. Don't worry about that. So this / will be a path part of the path. And following that, we'll just have the path, which could be like movie/popular. So this would be the path that this would be the part that corresponds to the path, and this would be the path that corresponds to the base URL. And in our case, the base URL is going to be the actual base API URL. So yeah, that's pretty much how we're going to be creating the URL. The next thing that we require is going to be our query string. So instead of us manually going inside of our URL, adding a question mark, and then adding the query and then adding all of the query parameters, for example, API key, and then their values, and kind of going like that, Dio provides us with a very efficient method where we provide it a map which has strings as its keys and then dynamic as its values, and it'll take each of the key inside of that map and it'll add those as a query string into the URL that we are actually going to be sending the request to automatically without us having to go in and change the URL. So now we're going to build our query, and regardless of whatever gets passed into us by this optional query parameter, there are two things that are always required by the API when we send a request. The first is the actual API key. I'll add a key for API key, and then I'll add the value for that, which is going to be API key, and then also language as well. So in what language do we actually require our results? And I'm going to do English US. So once this is done, we can do Alt-Shift-F command save, and now we have the query defined as well. But what if the user that's using the GET request actually wants to send them some additional query values? For that, what we can do is that we can check that if the query that was sent to us is not equal to null, and if it isn't, which means that there were some extra values sent to us for the query, we can do query.addAll. So we're going to add to the query dictionary that we created, or the query map that we created, all of the key value pairs that we have inside of the query that was passed in, and do command save. And finally, the last thing we are going to do is that we're going to return the actual dio.get method, and we're going to send the URL for the actual path, and then the query parameters requires a map, which we had already created in the previous step, so we'll pass in that, and we'll do Alt-Shift-F command save. Don't forget to use the await function here, because we are going to be sending the response back. So once we have this, the final thing that I'm going to do is that instead of using the cat statement, I'll change the cat statement to on dio error catch. And what we're going to catch an exception. And once we have an exception, I'm just going to copy these two things in because they're like really simple, just print statements, unable to perform GET request, and then we'll print the dio error and do command save. So now that we have our actual HTTP service defined, the last step that we have to do is that we have to register this service so that it's accessible to all of the other services that are present inside of our application. So the way I'm going to do this is that I'm going to go to our splash page and then to the setup function, and then the same way that we registered a singleton for app config class, I'm going to do getIt.register singleton, and then I'm going to say that the type of the singleton is going to be HTTP service, and then I'm going to open up the brackets, and inside of there I'm going to instantiate a new instance of HTTP service. I'm going to add a comma, and then I'm going to add the semicolon, do Alt-Shift-F command save. I'm going to go to the top and I'm going to make sure that the HTTP service is imported. So I'm going to do I'm going to remove the import statement that had already been added by Dart. I'm going to go down. I'm going to add a new section for services, and here I'm going to import /services/http service.dart. And with this, we're good to go. So now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to click on Start Debugging, and I'll wait for the app to actually launch on the simulator. But before I pause this video, I'd like to quickly give you a side note as to the way that we actually registered the singletons, the actual series in which we register each of the individual singletons, which is we do the app config first, and this is HTTP service, is crucial because for the HTTP service to actually function properly, the app config needs to be already configured and available, because if you remember, inside of the constructor for our HTTP service, we require access to our app config. So the way in which we register our singletons is important. So with that, I'm going to pause this video here and I'll resume it once we have the app actually running on the simulator. Okay, everyone, welcome back. The app is actually running on the simulator, and if I reload, you're going to see that we see our splash page, and then we actually get the actual screen shown to us as well. So with that, I'm going to end this video here, and I'm going to see you guys in the next one. Thank you. Hello, everyone, welcome back. So similar to what we did in the previous video, where we created our HTTP service, we defined some functionality inside of it, and then we registered it using the getIt package inside of our application. We're going to be doing the same process for another service that we'll be creating right now in this video, and that is going to be the movie service. So this movie service is going to allow us to actually get access to all of the different data that we require inside of our applications, such as getting popular movies, getting upcoming movies, or searching movies and things like that. So without anything further to do, let's get into it and let's see how to go about this. So just as a side note, we're not going to be defining the movie service completely. What we're going to be doing is just we're going to be creating the shell of the movie service, and then we're going to be actually registering it. And later down in other sections where the functionality is required as need be, we're going to be coding that functionality in the service and then using it throughout our application. So with that said, let's get going. So I'm going to create a new file inside of our services folder, and I'll call this movie_service.dart. Once this movie.service has been created, I'm going to create a class. I'll call this movie service, and then I'll define some things inside of this class that are required. First is going to be the getIt instance. So I'm going to do final getIt, which is going to be equal to getIt dot instance. And before we can do it, what I have to do is that I have to import the actual package. So I'll do packages comment and then import get underscore it dot dart. Yep. And then what I'll do is that I'll just now set this to be getIt dot instance. So with this, then I'll do command save and I'll move down. And now what we do is that we require access to our HTTP service. So I'll do HTTP service underscore HTTP. And then instead of using the automatic generated import by Dart, I'm going to create my own import by doing import /services /HTTP service.dart. The reason I redefine my import sometimes, even if the ID is already imported them for me, is one, just to kind of organize my imports, and second, to actually show you where I'm pulling all of the different things from. So now we have HTTP as well as defined as well. So now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create the constructor for my movie service class, and inside of the constructor, I'm going to do only one thing, and that is going to be get access to our HTTP service by using the getIt package that we have instance, and then doing .get. And similar to what we did for our actual app config here, we just require our HTTP service. So I'll do HTTP service and then voila, and do command save. So with this, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go back to our actual splash page and then go to the top, and where I have services, I'm going to import our movie service. So I'm going to do /services /movie_service.dart. I'm going to go down to our setup function. I'm going to copy this actual get or register singleton function. I'm going to paste this in. Make sure that you paste it after you're registering the HTTP service, because if you remember, our HTTP service is dependent, our movie service is dependent on our HTTP service to instantiate correctly. And then this instance is going to be of type, not HTTP service, but movie service. So movie service, and then here I'm going to instantiate a new instance of our movie service, remove the extra brackets, do command save, make sure I reload the application to make sure everything works. And as you can see, everything spins up correctly. So with that, we created the base shell for our movie service, and we actually registered it inside of our application as well, so that it's available to other services or resources that require it later down on the road. So with that, I'm going to end this video here, and I'm going to see you guys in the next one. Thank you. Module 3 in this course. In the previous modules, we had set up the basic skeleton for our application. We had defined some services. We had defined some functionality regarding our splash page. And now that our basic setup or pre-setup, as you can say, for our application is done, where we now have access to all of the essential services that are going to be required by our main page, we're ready to actually start with coding up the logic inside of our main page. And we're going to be doing that inside of this section. So with that, I'm going to end this video here. I'm going to see you guys in the next one. Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video, we're going to be starting by creating the UI for our main page.dart, and our focus in this video is going to be to create the background image that we see for our UI, as well as add like a backdrop filter onto it so that it makes it a blurred image. So without anything further to do, let's get into it and let's see how to do that. So to get started, I'm going to close all of the files that were previously open, and I'm going to go to our main page.dart. Inside of our main page.dart, if you remember in the previous videos, we had created a build UI function, which was responsible for building our UI. And now in this video, we're actually going to be extending upon it. So we're going to keep the scaffold widget that we had. And for those of you wondering, the app that I'm showing you right now in the simulator is the completed app that's running. And it's not the version of the app that we're currently developing. But I just kept it open here so that you guys can actually see as to what the end result we're trying to achieve, which is that we want a background image with a blur on it. So with that said, we can get started. So for our scaffold widget, what we're going to do is that we're going to add a property which is going to be background color. And this is just to make the color of the background be black, so when the actual image is loading, we just saw a black background. After that, we're going to add the body attribute to our scaffold, and this is going to be a container. And this container is going to have a height and a width, which we're going to give it first. And where are we going to get this height and width from? Well, what we're going to do is that we're going to define two properties inside of our class at the top, and these are going to be of type double, which one of these would be the device's height. So I'll call this device height. And then the other one would be double and underscore device width. Then once we have these two variables defined, the next thing we're going to do is that we're going to go to our actual build function. And inside of our build function, where we have access to our build context, we are going to do device height. And we're going to set that equals to media query dot of, we're going to give it the context, and then we're going to do dot size dot and then height. And then similar to this, for the actual device width, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do media query dot of context dot size dot width. Once we have these two things done, we're going to go back to our container, and we're going to set the device height for the height of the container, and we're going to set the device width for the width of the container, because if you can see, this container needs to extend all the way throughout the screen of our device, which is cover the whole height and the whole width. And this container is going to be the parent widget that is going to contain all of the UI elements, which are like the background image, as well as like all of the foreground stuff that we're seeing. So now that we have the container height and width defined, we're going to define the child for our container, and the child that we're going to be using is going to be a stack. So what is a stack? Well, a stack is a widget that allows us to put widgets one after another in a fashion where widgets are stacked one on top of each other. So as you can see in the example that I'm showing inside of our actual simulator, we have our background image behind our foreground widgets, which are like the search screen and then the actual scroll view for our movies. So this is achieved by using a stack widget. So inside of our stack widget, we have to first give it an alignment, and the alignment is going to be alignment.center. And then finally, we're going to give it a list of children, so the children widget that this stack is going to have. Now, before we can get going with our children widget, what we're going to do is that we're going to go down and we're going to create a new function, and we'll call this function background widget. So this function is going to be responsible for generating the background widget. And then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to return null for now, and we'll come back to this. And then inside of our children's list for our stack, I'm going to add background widget. So with this, I'll do Alt-Shift-F command save, and I'll go to our background widget now. So for our background widget, I'm going to return a container. And this container is going to have a height, and this height is going to be the height of the device, and this container is going to have the width, and this width is going to be the width of the device. Once we have these two things defined, the next thing that I'm going to define for the container is going to be the decoration attribute. And the decoration attribute is the attribute for the container that is going to allow us to set the image for the container. So this decoration is going to be of type box decoration. And then it's going to have a border radius. And I'm going to give the border radius dot circular 10.0. After that, I'm going to add the image to our actual decoration, and that image is going to be of type decoration image. And then from there, we'll have image of type network image, and this network image is going to get an actual URL. I copied the URL from Google, so I'm just going to get the image that I want for now, and then later on we'll change it to actually have the logic where once we click, it actually changes the image. But for now, I'll just add this URL in, and this is just a URL for a poster of Godzilla vs. Kong movie. So once I have this, the final thing that I have to do is that I have to define the fit for our image. But before we do that, what I'd like to do is that I'd like to actually run this in the simulator. So I'm going to start debugging the application, and then I'm going to wait for the application to actually launch on the device, and then once it's running on the device, I'm going to continue the video. So welcome back, everyone. As you can see, the app is now loaded onto the screen, and if I reload it, you're going to see that we actually see the splash screen, and then we're taken to our home screen. But there's a problem. The image is not extending completely and covering the height of the device. So to fix that, what we're going to do is that we're going to define the fit for network image, and that is going to be done by actually adding a new argument after the URL for our image, and that is going to be fit. And I'm actually putting it at the wrong place. It's not going to be inside of network image, sorry. It's going to be defined in the actual decoration image as an attribute which is fit. And then for this, we'll set it to box fit and then dot cover. So with this, I'll do Alt-Shift-F command save, and hopefully the image should extend up now. So okay, that fixes one of the issues, but the other issue that we have is that we gotta add a blur filter to our actual image to make it a blurred background. For that, what we're going to do is that we're going to define a child for our container. So after the decoration attribute, I'm going to define a child for our container, and this child is going to be a backdrop filter. And then this backdrop filter is going to have some properties. The first is going to be that it's going to have a filter property defined for it, and that is going to be image filter, and it's going to be image filter dot, and then we're going to do blur. And then inside of this blur, we're going to have a sigma x value and a sigma y value. So for the sigma x value, what you can do is you can experiment, but I found that sigma x for 15.0 works perfectly fine, as well as sigma y for 15.0, but play around with these values and you'll see how the blur kind of changes, and then set them to your heart's content. So once we have this defined, you're going to see that still nothing happens, and that is because we still have to define the child for our actual backdrop filter. So I'm going to define the child for our backdrop filter, and that is going to be container. This container is going to have a decoration. This decoration is going to be of type box decoration. And then this box decoration is going to have a color, and this color is going to be colors dot black dot with opacity 0.2. So till the time we don't actually apply a color and add a child to our backdrop filter and then apply a color to that child, we won't see the actual blur effect take place. If I do command save, you're going to see that the blur effect is now working and we can see the blurred background. So with that, we were able to successfully achieve the result of being able to have a background image with a blurred backdrop filter in front of it. So I'm going to end this video here, and I'm going to see you guys in the next one, where we'll continue further developing the UI for our main page. So thank you for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Hello everyone, welcome back. In the previous video, we had created our app to a state where we had the background widget defined for our application. And now in this video, we're going to be further developing the UI for our main page. And we're going to be focusing towards actually building this top search bar that you see in this video. So without anything further to do, let's get into it and let's see how to do it. So to get started, we'll go back to our build UI function, and similar to how we had our background widget function, I'm going to have a new function. I'll call this foreground, and then I'll call widgets. And this function is going to be responsible for building all of the foreground widgets. I'll go down and I'll create a new function, and this will be foreground widgets. And then inside of here, we'll start defining our actual UI. So to start out, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to return a container, and this container is going to have a padding given to it. So I'm going to define the padding attribute. And the reason we need the padding is because if you see, you can see that this container does not actually extend all the way to the height of the screen. There's like some padding from the left and the right side, and as well as from the top. And to add that padding, we're going to be adding that padding to this container using the padding attribute. So I'll do edge insets dot, and then I'm going to do from LTRB, so left, top, right, and bottom. And from the left, we need 0. From the right, we need 0. From the bottom, we need 0. And from the top, we need underscore device height times 0.02. And then I'm going to do Alt-Shift-F command save. And the reason I'm not adding padding from the left and right is because we're going to be using something else in the actual widget tree, which is going to be responsible for adding that padding. And that is going to be the actual width of our container. And the width of our container is going to be device width and then multiplied by 0.88. With that, I'm going to do command save. I'm going to stop the simulator for now because it's crashing for some reason. And it will continue developing, and I'll rerun it once we're at a state to actually see the UI changes. So now that we have the padding and the width defined, I'm going to define the child for our container, and this is going to be a column. So similar to a stack, column allows us to then align children one after another in a vertical fashion, where widgets go one after another from top to bottom. As you can see in the example that's being shown in the simulator, we have this search bar, and then after the search bar, we have this list view. So these are two separate widgets on the same plane. And this is going to be achieved by putting them inside of a column widget. So once we have the column widget, inside of the column widget, I am going to define firstly the main axis size. And that is going to be main axis size.max. So this tells the actual column to take the maximum size possible of whatever child or whatever parent it's inside. Once we have that, I'm going to define the main axis alignment. So the main axis alignment is how the widgets are aligned on the main axis, and the main axis in this case is going to be the vertical axis, and I'm going to do main axis alignment dot end. And finally, we'll have cross axis alignment, and cross axis alignment is going to be cross axis alignment dot center. With this, I'm going to add the final attribute that we need, which is going to be the list of children widgets for our column. And then before we define anything here, I'm going to go down and I'm going to define the actual function, which is going to be responsible for generating this search bar. And I'm going to call this the top bar widget, because this is not only responsible for searching, but it's also responsible for selecting categories as well. So I'm going to call it top bar widget, and I'll add that inside of our children's list. And with that, we're good to go. And now we're going to define the logic inside of our top bar widget. But before we get started with actually defining the UI component inside of our top bar widget, I'm going to actually run this application inside of the simulator, wait for it to spin up, and then once the application is actually running, I'm going to resume the video so that we can actually see in action the actual changes that we're making in code and how they reflect on screen. Okay, so if you spin up the app at this stage, you're going to see that you get an error, and that's perfectly fine. The error is something that we expect because we're not returning anything from the top bar widget function. So we'll now go to our top bar widget function and we'll start coding it up. So the first thing we're going to do is that we're going to return a container. This container is going to have a height, and this height is going to be our device height multiplied by 0.08. Once we have that, the next thing we're going to do is that we're going to add a decoration attribute to our container. And this is going to be of type box decoration. And then inside of here, I'm going to give it a color. So this is going to be the color of our container. And I'm going to give it colors.black 54. So a black color, which has 54% opacity. And then the border radius, which means the radius of our actual container, and that is going to be border radius. And then we're going to do dot circular. So dot circular and then 20. Add the trailing commas just so that the reformat of the code is good, and then we can continue onwards. So now that we have this, the next thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to define the actual child for our container. This child is going to be a row, and the reason we need a row is if I go back to the completed version of the app, we have the search bar, and after the search bar we have an actual drop down menu. And these are contained within the same container. And to get this kind of an effect where we have one widget followed by another widget in a horizontal fashion, we're going to be using a row. So I'm going to have the row widget, and the row widget, similar to how the column widget works, also expects us to first give it some attributes for main axis size. So I'm going to do main axis size dot max. Followed by that, we're also going to require the actual main axis alignment. So that is going to be main axis alignment dot space evenly. And finally, we'll require cross axis alignment, and cross axis alignment is going to be cross axis alignment dot center. And finally, we'll require the children. And the children in this case are going to be another function, and I'll call this our search field widget. And then we're going to go down and we're going to define it by doing widget underscore search field widget, and then coding the logic inside of here. So for our search field widget, we require an actual text field that is going to be responsible for getting text input. So I'm going to return a container. This container is going to have a width, which is going to be device width times 0.50. And then this container is going to have a height, and this height is going to be underscore device height multiplied by 0.05. I'm going to add the semicolon that was missing and continue on going. Then we'll define the child. The child is going to be a text field. The text field is going to require a controller attribute. I don't know why it added auto. And this controller, we're going to go and define up. So the way we're going to define the controller is that we're going to go to the top, and after our actual device height, we're going to create a new variable, and we'll call this text editing controller, and then we'll call it search text field controller. Then inside of our build function, we're going to take our search text editing controller and set that equal to a new instance of text editing controller, and then do command save. I'm going to go down to where we have our text field, and I'm going to set this to the controller to be our search text ed field controller, and do Alt-Shift-F command save. And I'm going to go back to our Flicked app and make sure that the app actually spins up, and you can see that our actual search field is going to be somewhere here. And the positioning for now, what we can do is that we can, instead of for our actual max axis alignment being end, we can do start, and then later on we'll do that to end, and then that'll fix the issue. But for now, just keep it at start to bring the search field up. So now that we have the controller defined for text field, we can continue on. So we're going to have an onSubmitted function, and for now, the onSubmitted function is going to take an input. So when we click on done on the keyboard, what's going to happen? And for now, we'll just don't do anything. We'll just have an empty function. Once that is done, the next thing is going to be the style of the text. So that is going to be text style, and it's going to be color and colors.white. And the reason I did this is because I want the color to be white for the text that we type in inside of our text field. Once we have this, we have to define the actual decoration for our field. So I'm going to define firstly the input decoration. Inside of here, we're going to have a focus border. So that is like when the actual text field is clicked on, what happens to the border. And the reason for that is because I want our actual text field to not have a border. So I'm going to go to the top of this function, and I'm going to define a variable. I'll call this border, and I'll set that to input border dot none. And then with this, we can do focus border, and you're going to see that the border is removed now. Before there was an underline, now there's no underline. The next thing they're going to be is going to be the border attribute, and that is going to be underscore border as well, because we don't want a focus border and we don't want an actual border as well. After that, we'll have a prefix icon, and the prefix icon is going to be, if I don't know, my computer is kind of getting slow suddenly. Prefix icon, and this prefix icon is going to be an icon widget, and this icon widget is going to have an icons.search, and then is going to have a color of colors.white 24. And then I'm going to add a comma here, do Alt-Shift-F, Command save, and you're going to see that that actual thing appears. I'm going to stop the simulator for now because for some reason my computer is becoming really slow, and we'll start it once we actually want to see the final result. So now once you have the prefix icon defined, I'm going to have the hint style, and the hint style is going to be text style. And then this is going to be the actual style of the text that appears when we have not put anything inside of our search field. And it's just telling us what to put inside of it. And it's going to have a color of white 54. Then we're going to have a filled property, and the filled property is going to be false. Then we are going to have a fill color, and the fill color is going to be colors.white 24. And then finally, the last thing that we need is going to be our hint text, and our hint text is going to be search, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 dots. Do Command save, and now I'm going to run the application, and then I'm going to resume the video once the application is actually running. Hello everyone, welcome back. So now the actual application is running on the simulator, and you can see that we have our text field actually having stuff that's being input into it, and everything looks good. So with that, I'm going to end this video here, and now in the next video we'll further develop the UI, and we're going to be working towards adding the actual drop-down menu to the right side of our search field that will allow us to select different categories of movie results that we would like to fetch. So with that, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video, we're going to be continuing further developing the UI for our main page. And our focus in this video is going to be towards building the drop-down selector for the different categories of movie that we want to pull the results for. So with that said, let's get back to the application that we were developing, and let's see how to do it. So previously we left off with having a widget that had a search field inside of it. And now in this video, we're going to be adding the actual category selector to this widget. So to get started, I'd like you to go to the _top bar widget function that we have. And for the row child that we have inside of the children's attribute, I'm going to, after the search field widget, create a call to a new function, which is going to be responsible for generating this category selector. And I'll call this category selection widget. And then after that, I'm going to go down and I'm going to create the new function, and I'm going to call this category selection widget. And then with that, we can open it up. So the first thing that we're going to do is that we're going to return a drop down button. And this drop down button requires items, but before we define the items, I'm going to remove this and I'm going to define some other attributes that we require. So firstly, it's going to be the drop down color. So the color of the drop down, and this is going to be colors.black38. Once we have this, the next thing is going to be the value. So the initial value that this category selection or this drop down button is going to have. And where are we going to get it? Well, we're going to get it right now from a model, but later on we'll change it to actually reflect the actual state of the page. To get going, what we can do is that we can actually create inside of our models folder a new file, and we can call this file search_category.dart. Once we have this, what we're going to do is that we're going to just create a simple class, which we're going to call search category. And once we have this, inside of this class, we're just going to define some static variables, which is static final string, and we'll call this popular. And then we'll give this a value popular. And then similar to this, we'll have static final string, and the other category is going to be upcoming. So just add that in, and then I'm going to call this upcoming. And then finally, the last is going to be static final string, and then none. And we'll set that equal to just an empty string. Do command save, go back to our main page, go to the top. Here, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to import / and then models / search underscore category dart. And then what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to change my imports, or just add the proper necessary comments. So packages here, and then models here. Then go down to where we have our actual category selection widget. And for the value, I'll call this search category dot. And then for now, we can just set it to popular. Later on, we'll change it. So now that we have the value defined, the next thing that we have to define is going to be the actual icon. So let me add that. So icon, and then it's going to be icon, and then it's going to be icons.menu. And then we're going to give it a color, and the color is going to be colors.white24. Do command save, and you're going to see that we can see that drop down actually appears, but we still can't click on it, so we can continue on. Next thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to add the underline attribute. So for that, I'll define underline, and then I'm going to do container, and then this container is going to have a height of 1, and then the color is not a color, but the color is going to be colors.white and then 24. Do command save, and then we have an underline as well. So once we have the underline defined, the next thing is going to be the Unchanged function. So Unchanged, we're going to get a value. So every time the value for this drop down button changes, it's going to call this function. And for now, we'll leave it empty. We'll come back to it in a later point. And finally, we'll have our items. So for our items, I'm going to have this list of items, and inside of here, we'll have all of the items that are actually selectable. So I'm going to do drop down menu item, and then we're going to have firstly a child, which is going to be a text widget, and this text widget is going to have the actual text, and that text is going to be by doing search category dot and then popular. The next thing that we're going to have is the style for the text. So the style, let me just add it, style, and the style is going to be text style, and then it's going to be color, and then colors.white. Do Alt-Shift-F just to reformat the code. I'm going to add the trailing comma here, and now we have this one drop down item. If I do command save, it's going to say that it gets an error. So we need to add more items to our actual drop down. So I'm going to add another one, and then another one. And the second one is going to be search category.upcoming, and then the final option, or the third option, is going to be search category.none. To command save. Now, before we can even begin to fix the error, we have to also give a value to the drop-down menu item. And that value is what gets passed into the Unchanged function. So I'm going to define the value, and the value is going to be the same. So it's going to be search category.popular. The value here is going to be search category.upcoming for the second drop-down menu item. And then for the third one, it's going to be .none. Do command save, and you're going to see that our drop-down now actually works. So it actually shows us the 3 menu items. So now with that, we've successfully implemented our category selection widget. And in the next video, we're going to be further developing the UI. So with that, I'm going to end this video here, and I'm going to see you guys in the next one. Thank you. Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video, we're going to be creating the class that is going to be responsible for actually encapsulating all of the data that is required for each of the movies that we actually pulled down from the movie database API. So the way this is going to work and why we need the model is that if you go to the, for example, documentation for the movie database API and then to an endpoint that we're going to be using, in our case /movie/popular, you're going to see that if you get a 200 response, which is a okay response, which means that we get some results given to us, the response is going to have a results key, which is going to be an array of objects, and each object is going to have these certain properties, which are going to be some keys and then values assigned to them. What we want to achieve from our class is we want to take this data and then we want to actually give it some structure and then be able to actually use it throughout our application. And that's why we're going to be creating a class that is going to help us actually give structure to this data. So without anything further to do, I'm going to get back to our application that we're developing, and we're going to be going to the lib folder and actually creating that class. So similar to the app config model and search category model that we have, I'm going to create a new file, and this new file is going to be called movie.dart. So this movie.dart file is going to hold the class, which is going to be responsible for actually encapsulating all movie data. And this class is going to be responsible for representing one movie object. So in a typical response, we might pull down data for a lot of different movies. And then for each of those movies, as you can see, if I go to the completed version of our application, we're going to have an instance of this class. So like this movie would have an instance of this class, then the next one would have an instance of this class, then the next one. So let's get going. So what are some things that we need for our movie? Well, the first thing that we need for our movie is its name. So I'm going to create final string and call it name. The next thing that we need for our movie is the language that that movie has. So I'm going to call this language. Then similar to that, we also need a Boolean to signify, is this an adult movie? So I'll call this adult, is adult. Then we also need a string for the actual description of the movie. Then we need a final and then string, and then the poster path. So the actual path to the poster. Then we need a backdrop path. So the backdrop path refers to the path of the backdrop. So when we click on a actual movie, the background that changes what the path for that image is. So that's the backdrop path. And that is going to be backdrop path. Similar to this, then we also need a number to store the rating for our actual movie. And then finally, we also need an actual string for the release date of the movie. It's date, not data. So once we have this, the next thing we're going to do is that we're going to create the constructor for our movie, which is going to be responsible for actually instantiating this object. So we're going to open up our curly brackets. Inside of this, I'm going to give it this dot name, then this dot language, this dot is adult, this dot description, this dot poster path, this dot backdrop path, this dot rating, and then this dot release date. With this, I'm going to do Alt-Shift-F, Command save, and you should see that all of the errors are resolved. But what we're going to be doing is that we're not going to be just ending all of the development here. What I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to be adding some helpful functionality to this class to aid our development experience. So the first thing that I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to be creating a factory method that is going to allow us to take in some JSON representation of a movie and then actually instantiate this movie object instance and then return it to us. So for that, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to do this factory function. I'm going to call this movie.fromJSON. And then this is going to actually take a map, which is going to have strings as keys and then dynamic as its values. So it's going to be a map of type string dynamic. And then we're going to call this underscore JSON. And then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to open up the curly brackets. I'm also going to stop the debugger because we don't require it. And then we can continue developing. So inside of here, I'm going to return a movie and we can now begin coding. So the first thing that we're going to do is that we're going to do the name attribute, and this is going to be underscore JSON and then the title. Once we have this, I'm going to add a comma, Alt-Shift-F to reformat the code and keep on going. After the name, we'll also require the language. So the language is going to be underscore JSON, and then the key is going to be original language. And if you're wondering where I'm getting all of this information from, well, if you go back to the documentation and then go to the specific path that we're going to be using, which is going to be /movie/popular or /movie/upcoming, you're going to see that the actual results array is going to have an array of objects, and each object is going to have these key and then values and what their actual types are going to be. So I'm taking the actual keys from here. So as you can see, original language, that's what we're using here as well. Once we have that, I'm going to do is adult, and that is going to be JSON and then adult. Similar to that, we'll have description, and this is going to be underscore JSON and then description. We can keep on going. Then we're going to have out, and the description is not description, it's actually overview, if I remember correctly, yes. Then we're going to have poster path. So poster path is going to be underscore JSON and then poster path. Second to this, we'll have backdrop path, so underscore JSON and then backdrop path. Following this, we'll have our rating. The rating is going to be underscore JSON and then board average, so board underscore average. And then finally, we'll have release date, and the release date is going to be underscore JSON and then release underscore date, and then do comma and do Alt-Shift-F, command save. The last thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to be adding a helper function to this class, which is going to actually return us the complete URL for our poster. So I'm going to call this poster URL, and then inside of here, I am going to firstly access the app config by doing final app config is equals to underscore app config is equals to get it dot instance dot get app config, and then that's pretty much it. And then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to return a string, which is going to have firstly the base image URL, so app config dot base image API URL, followed by the actual poster path, so this dot poster path, and then do Alt-Shift-F, command save. So that's pretty much all we have to do. The next thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to the top and I'm just going to fix up my imports. So package get it is correct, but for the models, I have to add the model myself. I don't like the auto imports. So import dot slash models slash and then app underscore config dot dart or dart. And with this, we can do command save. So with this, we've successfully defined the actual movie class for our actual application. And this movie class is going to encapsulate all of the data for each of the movie results that we're going to be pulling. So with that, I'm going to end this video here, and I'm going to see you guys in the next one. Take care, and thank you for watching. Hello everyone, welcome back. So now that we've defined the structure for our movie data by creating a class that is going to store all of this information regarding a particular movie, I think it's time for us to actually get back to our main page and start creating the UI that is going to actually display our results. And the UI element that I'm talking about in particular is going to be the list view that we're showing actually, where we show all of the movies that have been pulled once we have the data available to us from the API. So to get started, what we're going to do is that we're going to go back to our main page and we're going to go to the function which is responsible for generating the foreground widgets. And to that, we're going to be adding the widget which is going to be responsible for showing our movies list, and the widget that we're going to be creating is going to be a widget that is going to be a list view. So without anything further to do, let's look into how to build this kind of a widget. So to get started, what I'll do is that I'll go to my children's array, or children's list I should say, inside of my column for my foregrounds widget, and here I'm going to create a container. Because I want to define a size for our list view, that's why I'm putting it inside of a container. Then I'm going to give it a height, and the height is going to be the height of our device times 0.83. I'll just do Alt-Shift-F to reformat the code and continue on. I'll give it a padding, and the padding is going to be edge insets and that dot symmetric. So what symmetric does is that it applies the same padding on the vertical axis from both the top and bottom, and on the horizontal axis from both the left and right. So we're just going to be applying horizontal or vertical padding, and I'll call this device height times 0.01. Finally, the last thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to define the child, and the child is going to be a function which is going to be called movie list view widget. And then to keep the naming convention consistent, it's actually movies, do command save. With this, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go down, and here what I'm going to do is that I'm going to now define the function. So this function is going to be responsible for actually returning a list view widget. So I'm going to say that the return type is going to be widget, and then it's going to be movies list view widget. And then what we're going to do is that we're going to open it up and start coding inside of this function. So the first thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to define a list of movies, and I'm going to call this final movies and equals to, and then I'll set this to empty for now. The next thing I'm going to do is that I am going to create an if statement, and inside of this if statement I'll say is that movies.length is not equals to 0. So if we have movies, then what we'll do is that we'll actually show our list view. And if that is not the case, then what we'll do is that we'll show a circular indicator. So I'm going to return this center thing, center widget, and inside of the center widget I'll have a child, and this will be a circular progress indicator. And then for the circular progress indicator I'll have the background color, and that will be colors.white. And I'll add the semicolon at the end, do Alt-Shift-F, command save. And you should see, because we haven't defined anything for our movies, we're having this circular progress indicator being shown. And the reason we use the center widget is because we want to center this on the screen. Okay, so now that we have this, we're ready to actually start creating our list view. So the way we're going to create our list view is that we're going to be using a list view.builder, which is a extension of the list view widget, which allows us to build the list view using a builder function. And that builder function is called an item builder. But before we can use the item builder, what I'd like to do is that I'd like to define some additional properties required by our builder function. And the first one is going to be the item count. So what's the item count? Well, the item count is just going to be whatever our movies list is. And then we're going to have dot length. And with this, I'm going to do comma, and then I'll do the actual item builder. And then the item builder is actually a function that takes in a build context as well as an integer detailing to what item needs to be built. So for the build context, it's simple as just a build context that gets passed in, and then we get an int that tells us the count. I'll just like to call it count. You can call it index as well, and then do Alt-Shift-F just to reformat the code. So now inside of this function, we define the structure for how each of our actual tile or actual element inside of our list view should look like. So if I go back to the pre-built version of our application, each child of our list view is what we're going to be defining inside of this item builder function. So what we're going to be starting off is that we're going to be starting off by returning a widget which has a padding. And then inside of this widget, we're going to define the padding, and the padding is going to be edge insets dot symmetric. And then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to define the vertical padding, which will be device height times 0.01. And I'm going to add the semicolon at the end to Alt-Shift-F just to reformat the code. And then I'm going to define the horizontal padding as well, and the horizontal is going to be 0. And then the child to our padding is going to be a gesture detector. And we'll just add a gesture detector for now. A gesture detector, what it allows us to do, it allows us to detect different kind of user interactions on whatever child widget we place inside of it. So we'll have an onTap function for now. So that means every time this widget is tapped, do something. And for now, we'll just leave that function empty. And then finally, we'll define the child for this as well. And the child for this is just going to be for now a text widget. And this text widget, what we're going to do is that we're going to take the movies, and then we're going to, for example, take the count, and then from the count, we're going to take the actual, and I'll define what type of this, what list this type is. So it's going to be a list of type movie. And then we need to import the movie model. So I'm going to go to the top. I'm going to import /models/movie . Then I'm going to come down to our movies list, and then here where we have the text, I'm just going to take that we're going to do dot, and then we're going to do name and do Alt-Shift-F command save. So for now, just to actually add dummy data to our application, I'm just going to quickly go here, and I'm going to do for I'm going to create a for loop. And in this for loop, we're going to go to 20. And each time we iterate, we're going to do movies.append or add, and we're going to add a new movie object to it. And we're going to provide all of this information. So what information do we require? If you go back, you're going to see that we require the name, the language, and the things like that. So for the name, let's just do Mortal Kombat. So I'm just taking the information from just the language will be English. Then we'll take the actual is adult. We'll just call it false. I'm going to do Alt-Shift-F just to reformat the code. After the adult, we are going to have, let me go back and see description. Description we can do, let me just go to actually Google and get a description from there. And I'm just pulling the description for the game, but similar things should apply. We just want just some dummy data for now. Similar to that, we are going to require, if I go back, the actual poster path and backdrop path. So poster path, and then the backdrop path, and then we'll fill them later on, and then we'll require the rating, and the rating is going to be 7.8, and then 7.8, and then finally the last thing that I require is the release date, and the release date is going to be let me see, it's going to be 2021, and it's a string actually, so 2021-04-07. Now I'm going to pause the video right here, and I'm going to go and I'm going to attain the actual poster path and backdrop path for the actual movie by making a request to the API and getting it from there. So just give me 1 second, I'm going to go do that and then resume the video. Hello everyone, welcome back. So to get the poster path and backdrop path, what I did was that I actually sent a request to the moviedb.org API to the /movie/popular endpoint, and I provided my API key in the params section for the actual Postman program. And from there, I got a response back. And in that response, I took the results list, and for the first result that I caught, I copied the backdrop path and put it for the backdrop path, as you can see here, copied it over, and then for the poster path, I copied it over the poster path. And with that, we have all of the necessary data that we require. So I'm going to just close Postman, do command save. and start debugging our application. And in the meantime, what I'm going to do is that I am going to pause the video and I'm going to resume it once we have the app running again. So I'm going to go back to our application and then I'm going to pause the video and I'll see you once the video is running, or once the app is running. Hello everyone, welcome back. So now that the app is running, we have all of the data being added to our movies list by just having a for loop and adding dummy data. You can still see that no text is displayed for our actual list view. And the reason for that is because we forgot to return our actual list view.builder. So I'll just add the return statement here, do command save, and through the magic of hot reload, you're going to see that now we start getting the titles for the movies. So now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to end this video here, and in the next video we're going to continue developing the UI for our main page, and in particular we're going to be focusing towards refining the design for the actual child that gets returned for our list view. So with that, I'm going to end this video here. I'm going to see you guys in the next one. Thank you for watching and have a good day. Everyone, welcome back. In this video, we're going to be focusing towards building the actual children for our movies list view widget, which are actually going to render information for each of the movies that we have. So if I close the application that's currently running and I open up the completed version of our application, these are the tiles that I'm talking about. So without anything further to do, we're going to now move forward to actually creating these kinds of children for our list view, and specifically we're going to call them a tile. So that's just a name that I came up with, but that's just something that I wanted to clear out before we get going. So without anything further to do, let's get into it and let's see how to develop a UI like that. So to get started, what I'll do is that inside of my libs folder or lib folder, I'm going to create a new folder and I'm going to call this widgets. Once that is done, inside of there, I'm going to create a new file and I'm going to call this file movie_tile.dart. So this movie_tile.dart file is going to be responsible for actually storing the widget, which is going to be responsible for rendering information regarding a specific movie. So I'm going to now define the class, and this class is going to be called movie tile. And I do not know, I'm having difficulty typing, and it's going to extend stateless widget. Once we have this, I'm going to open up the curly brackets and we're ready to define some of the properties inside of our class. So the first thing that we need is that we need a reference to the height of this tile. So I'll just create a double final for storing the height. Similar to that, I'll create a double for storing the width as well, and these will be provided to us when we actually instantiate this class, and we'll take a look at it as we move on. Then I'm going to create a variable that is going to store the information for our movie, and then finally what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create the actual movie tile constructor, and here what I'm going to do is that I'm going to say this dot movie comma this dot height comma this dot width. So we'll have these three parameters passed in, and then they'll be saved in the corresponding variables that we have. Now you're going to see that we're getting an error for the movie, and that is because we haven't imported the model. So I'm going to add / models, and then I'm going to import the actual models. I'm going to do / models / and then movie.dart, and then this should fix the error. After this, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to import the packages as well that we require. So packages, and then the packages that we need are firstly going to be the material package provided to us by Flutter. And then the second package we need is going to be the actual get_it package. So get_it.dart, and we're good. And why do we need get_it? The reason will become clearer just in a bit. So now I'm going to define another variable. This is also going to be a final. It's going to be of type getIt. It's going to be called _getIt, and we'll just get an instance of the getIt. So getIt.instance, similar to how we've done previously in our development process. Finally, we're going to create the build method, which is why we're getting this error here, because it expects us to implement the implementation of the stateless widget.build method. So I'm going to do that, and now we have the actual build method in place, and then I'm going to return null for now. Do Alt-Shift-F, Command Save, and we forgot a semicolon here, so do Command Save. So now that we have this, we're ready to actually start building our widget. So for our widget, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to return a container. This container is going to have a child, and this child is going to be a row. And then this row is going to have a main access size, and the main access size is going to be main access size dot max. Following that, we'll have a main access alignment, which will be main access alignment dot space between, and finally we'll have a cross axis alignment, and the cross axis alignment will be cross axis alignment dot start. With this, I'll do Alt Shift F, and you're going to see that we've defined the necessary attributes for the positioning and sizing of our row, and we can move to actually defining the children. For the children, we're going to have two children, and the children in our case are going to be the actual poster and then the actual informative widget, which will comprise of like multiple different widgets positioned. So we're going to start off with defining these two first. So what I'm going to do is that inside of my children's list, I'm going to do movie poster widget, and then I'm going to pass in the movie dot poster URL. And then I'm going to do Alt Shift F command save, and I'm going to go down and now I'm going to define this function. And this function is going to be really simple. This is going to be a widget, which will be movie poster widget. And this widget is going to get a string, which will be our images URL. And then what we're going to do is that we're going to return a container, which will contain an image. So container with a fixed height, which height will be the height and width will be the width. And then the decoration attribute will define a box decoration. And then I'm going to add the semicolon here to Alt Shift F. And then inside of here, I'm going to define image of type decoration image, and then image, and then network image. And then inside of here, I'll just pass in the image URL. With this, I'm going to add the trailing comma and then do Alt Shift F command save. And now what we're going to do is that we're going to go back to our actual main page. And here I'm going to go to the top and I'm going to import the widget, and I'm going to stop the hot reload process for a minute. And I'm going to call this widgets. And here I'm going to import the widget that we just created. So widgets slash movie underscore tile dot dart. And then I'm going to go down to where we have our actual movies list view widget, and then where we have our actual gesture detector, and then that gesture detector has a child, and that child is actually a text widget. We're going to replace that, and we're going to replace that child, instead of being a text widget, to be a movie tile. And then inside of here, we're going to pass the movie, and the movie is going to be the movies underscore count. And then the height is going to be the device height times 0.20, and then the width is going to be the underscore device width times 0.85. With this, I'll do Alt Shift F command save. I'm going to run the application. I'm going to pause the video, and once the application is on screen running again, I'll resume it. Okay, so the app is running, and as you can see that we have actually the poster for each of the movies that we're rendering being displayed. Now the next thing that we need to do is that we need to add the information column to the actual right of this poster as indicated in the final version of our application. So let's get into it and let's see how to do that. So we'll go back to our movie tile, and whatever we're going to be doing is going to be happening inside of the movie tile again. And what we're going to do is that we're going to go back to our actual children's list for our actual row. And inside of here, I'm going to now call another function, and that is going to be the movie info widget. So just a widget responsible for showing all of the information for the movie. Now what we're going to do is that we're going to define the function, and this function is going to be called movie info widget. And then with that, we are ready to start coding. So the first thing we're going to do is that we're going to return a container, because we're going to be encapsulating everything within a container. We're going to give our container a height, which will be equal to the height, and then a width. and the width is going to be equals to width times 0.66. These are just some of the measurements that worked for me. I'm going to do Alt-Shift-F just to reformat the code and continue on. And now I'm going to define a child for our container. It's going to be a column, not a calendar date picker. It's a column. This column is going to have main axis size, which will be main axis size dot max. Then we'll have the main axis alignment. So main axis alignment, and that will be main axis alignment dot start. And then finally, we'll have cross-axis alignment, and the cross-axis alignment will be cross-axis alignment dot, and then we'll have start as well. I'll do Alt-Shift-F just to reformat the code. Now that we have this, we're going to define the children. So the children are going to be a container, and this container is going to be responsible for actually storing the rating of the movie as well as the name of the movie. And this container is going to have a width, and this width is going to be width times 0.56, and then it's going to have a child, and then this child is going to be of type text. And then here we're going to send the movie.name. And finally, we're going to define the overflow function for our actual text. So we allowed the text overflow, and that is going to be text overflow.ellipsis. And then finally, we'll have the style. And let me define the style as well for our text. And the style is going to be text style. And then it's going to be color, and then colors.white. It'll be the font size, which will be 22. And then it'll be the font weight, which will be font weight dot NW 400. Then do Alt-Shift-F, command save. And you're going to see that the actual image now shows, or the actual title now shows up, and we'll fix the actual sizing issues that we have as we go along. Once we have the actual container that is going to contain the title of our movie defined, we are now ready to move on to the next part, and that is going to be the container that is going to be showing the rating of our movie. And that is just going to be a simple text widget. This text widget is going to have a movie dot, and then we should have rating. And give me 1 second to see what the problem is. Yes, I see what the problem is. The thing or the text widget should be here, and not inside of the actual container, and then it should be movie.rating.toString. And then I'm going to do Alt-Shift-F, and then I'm going to continue on defining the style, and the style is going to be text style. And then color, and then it's going to be colors dot white, and then the font size is going to be 22. And okay, so now that we've defined the actual container and the text widget, for which one of them contains the actual title of our movie, which is the name, and then the other the rating, I'm going to copy and put them inside of a row, because right now they're being stacked in a vertical fashion, and I want them to be stacked in a horizontal fashion. So I'll copy these two widgets. I'll create a row widget. This row widget is going to have a main axis size, will be main axis size dot max. This will have a main axis alignment, which will be main axis alignment dot space between, and then it'll be a cross-axis alignment, and the cross-axis alignment is going to be cross-axis alignment dot center. Then children, and then I'll do Alt-Shift-F, and then here inside for the children I'm going to paste in the two widgets that we have defined, and I'm going to do command save. And with that, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to pause this video here, because I believe it's been going on for quite a long time. And in the next video, we'll just continue on from this point onwards. So thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Hello everyone, welcome back. In the previous video, we had left off our movie_tile widget in a state where we had the poster displaying, and then we had the actual information regarding the movie name being displayed, as well as the rating, which are currently not being displayed on screen due to an overflow error, and we'll continue developing from that point onwards. So now what I'm going to be focusing on is going to be adding the information regarding the movie's language, its release date, as well as whether it's an adult movie or not. And to do that, what I'll do is that I'm going to, after this row widget, I'm going to add a new widget, which is going to be a container. And this container is going to have a padding, and this padding is going to be edge insets dot from left, top, right, bottom, and then it's going to be 0. From the top, it's going to be height times 0.02. From the right, it's going to be 0, and from the bottom, it's going to be 0. And then after that, I'm going to add the child. The child is going to be a text widget, and inside of here, I'm going to define the actual text. So I'm going to have this one long string where we're going to have the movie dot language dot to uppercase. So we'll have the language of the movie. Following that, we'll have the actual rating for the movie, and the rating is going to be just a $, and then we'll have the movie dot rating, or not rating, sorry, the adult rating. So is it an R or not? And that's just going to be movie dot is adult. And finally, the last thing is going to be the release date of the movie, and that is going to be the movie dot release date. And with this, I'm going to do Alt-Shift-F command save, and hopefully that information should pop up as well. Okay, so now that we have the text string defined, which is going to be showing the language, the adult rating, as well as the release date, you can see in the actual rendering that the text is in black. So I'm going to quickly change the text styling, and then I'm going to make it so that it's white. So I'm going to do text style, and why is it giving me an error? Oh yeah, because it's not inside of the actual text component. And then I'm going to do Alt-Shift-F, add the comma here as well, and then inside of here for the text style, I'm going to do color, and it's going to be colors dot white, and then I'm going to be the font size, and that's going to be font size 10 or 12 actually. And then I have to define the style here, so I'll do style, and then style is going to be of type text style, and we should be good. So I'm going to do Alt-Shift-F command save, and we should be good. So now the final thing that we need to do is that we have to add a container, which is going to give information regarding the description of our movie. And this container is going to have firstly some padding. So I'm just going to copy and paste it in because it's really simple and similar to what we were doing previously, which is edge insets dot from left, top, right, bottom. And the height is going to be from the top, we're going to have a padding of height times 0.07. Once we have that, the next thing we're going to do is that we're going to define the child, and the child is going to be a text widget. This text widget is going to take the movie.description as its text. It's going to have a max lines attribute of 9. It's going to have an overflow attribute. So if our description is really long, we'll just cut it by adding ellipses at the end. And then finally, we'll have the style. And then the style is going to be text style. And then color, colors dot white 70. And then finally the font size, and the font size is going to be 10, and we'll do Alt-Shift-F command save. Okay, so now that we've defined all of the widgets, I'm going to end this video here, and I'm going to see you guys in the next one. And in the next video, we're going to be actually working towards solving the actual constraint issues that we have and the overflow errors that we are seeing. So with that, I'm going to end this video here, and I'm going to see you guys in the next one. Thank you. Hello everyone, welcome back. In the previous video, we had left our application in a state where we had the movie tile widget completed, but we were having some issues rendering that actual widget on screen, whereby we were actually experiencing an overflow error of pixels where the content that we were trying to show did not have enough space inside of the widget, and hence we were getting an overflow error given to us by Flutter. And the reason to this is because in the development of the UI, there were two specific typos that I made while doing the code. And I'm going to show them to you. And once we fix those two typos, our UI is going to resemble 100% the UI that we had seen in the actual demo application at the start of our course. So without anything further to do, let's get into it and let's see how to do this. So the first thing that we're going to do is that we're going to go to our main_page.dart file and to the very specific function which is responsible for generating our foreground widgets. And therefore our width property for the top level container, instead of multiplying the device height times 0.88, we had to multiply device width. So this was one of the typos that we made. And if I now do command save, you're going to see that it'll improve the UI, whereby our topmost search bar is going to have some padding from the site, as well as you're going to see that the content of the movie tile is also being shrunk. And then the next fix that we have to make is that if we go to our movie tile, and inside of our movie tile to the actual function which is responsible for rendering our movie poster widget, and inside of that function we have the attribute width, which we set directly to the width of the widget that gets passed in. And instead of that, what we had to do was that we had to do width times 0.35 to constrain the width of our image. And if we did that and we did command save, you're going to see that our UI problems are now fixed and we can scroll, as you can see. The last thing that we're going to be doing is that we're going to be going to our actual build UI function and to the scaffold. We're going to fix a really small error, and that is when we click on our search bar and the text box appears, or the keyboard appears, sorry, we get an overflow error. And the way we're going to fix this is that we're inside of our scaffold, we're going to have a property that is called resize to avoid bottom indent, and we're going to set that to false. Doing this, doing command save, reloading our application, you're going to see that our actual issue is going to get fixed now, where the UI is no longer required to resize itself when the keyboard pops up. And with this, we are pretty much good with the UI development aspect of application. The last final tweak that we need to make, and some of you might not be able to immediately see that there's something wrong with the UI, is that our top notch in our device, as well as our actual search bar, is too close to the top of the device, as you can see. And there's some empty space at the bottom of our list as well. And our list is kind of like floating in the middle of the page. And the way we're going to fix this is that we're going to go back to our main_page.dart file, and then again to the same function responsible for generating our foreground widgets, and then to the column that actually houses our top bar widget as well as our movies list view. And there inside of our columns attributes where it has main axis alignment, instead of doing main axis alignment.start, we're going to do main axis alignment.end and do command save. And this way you're going to see that our UI is rendered in a manner which is 100% accurate as to what was shown in the demo application at the start of this course. And with that, I'm going to end this video here. I hope welcome back. Congratulations on making it to this new section inside of our course. In this section, we're going to be focusing towards using the Flutter River part package, which is a state management package, which we had imported previously in this course to actually interact with our TheMovieDB database API and pull some data from there, which then we're going to be displaying in the UI that we have built in the previous sections. So with that, I'm going to end this video here. I'm going to see you guys in the next one where we're going to begin that process. So thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Hey everyone, welcome back. In this video, we're going to be beginning the process of actually working towards getting our RiverPod provider package, actually pulling data from the REST API that we're going to be using from the moviedb.org, and then actually taking that data that we get from the API and then somehow linking it to the UI that we have built. So the way we're going to achieve this task is that we're going to be using something known as a state notifier that is provided to us by RiverPod. And what a state notifier does is that whenever the state inside of it changes, it initializes a widget rebuild automatically. And how are we going to achieve this task? Well, it's going to be pretty simple. What we're going to do is that we're going to model a class which is going to contain all of the data that is required by our main page. So that would be the data that might be in the search text, or the movies that are currently being displayed, any operations that we might want to do on the page, such as get popular movies or get upcoming movies, as well as keep track of what the current state is. We're going to take all of that and we're going to make a class which is going to be responsible for taking that state and maintaining it. And then what we're going to be using is that we're going to be wrapping a state notifier around that class, which is then going to be responsible for actually updating that class, changing the data inside of that class, giving us notifications on any events that might happen to that data. And when all of that combines with the magic of Riverpod and Provider, which is something that Riverpod is based upon, we are going to be seeing a fully functioning UI that is going to be responding to our actual interactions with the UI and then giving us the data as we require. So with that said, let's get into it and let's see how to do this. So the first thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this folder controllers. And I'll just leave this folder here for now. And the next thing that I'm going to do is that I am going to create a new file inside of our models, and I'll call this our main page ... So this is a class which is going to model the data that we require for our main page. And this class is going to be pretty simple in the actual essence of it, from if you just look at the code, but the flexibility that it will provide us is going to be immeasurable. So let's get into it and let's see how to create this class. So the class is going to be called main page data, and inside of this class, first thing is that I want to maintain a list of the movie that we have to show inside of the UI. So I'm going to call that movies. Now you might see an error that says that, oh, movie isn't being defined, and for that what we're going to do is that we're just going to import the movie model, so /movie dart, and that should work. With this, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to define the next thing, and that is going to be a thing that is going to help us with implementing pagination, and we are going to call this final int and then page. So this is going to be the current page that we have pulled the results from, and it'll make sense later on. But for those of you who don't know what pagination is, it's basically a way of an API giving us data in chunks. So it doesn't give us like all the million records or thousands of records about movies that it has. The first time we might make a request for page 1, it'll give us 10 movies. Then we might send another request where we might increment the page to 2, and then it'll give us the next 10 movies. And this is how it go. And to keep track of which page we're at, we're going to be using the page. After that, we're going to have another variable. This time it's going to be string, and this is going to be search category. So this is going to be the string that's going to be responsible for actually keeping track of what our search category is. Finally, we'll have another variable, and that is going to be the search text. So this is going to be the text that is inside of our actual text widget here, or our search field, I should say. Once this is done, I'm going to define the actual constructor for our class, and the constructor is going to be pretty simple. It's going to take the movies, it's going to take the page, it's going to take the search category, and it's going to take the search text. And with this, I'm going to add the remaining semicolon here and do Alt-Shift-F. Once we're done with that, I'm going to create an alternate constructor for our class, and I'll call it initial, and this will just be the ability for me to create a constructor with just basic data inside of it. So I'll call it main page data.initial, and then I'll say that it's going to be movies equals to an empty list. It'll be the page is equals to 1. It'll be the search category is equals to search category, and I need to import search category. So I'm going to go to the top here again, and I'm going to import /search category .dart, and then I'll use it here. So search category, and it's going to be .popular, and then the search text. So this is going to be the initial state of our movie or main page data class if I want to initialize it in a certain way, and that's what I'm doing here. So once I have this, I'm going to add the semicolon here and do Alt-Shift-F command save. Moving on, so I'm going to create another helper function, and I'll call this copy with. Okay, so what does the copy with function require? Well, it's going to require the same things. First, we need a list of movies. So list of movie, and then we'll call it movies. We'll require a page. We'll require a string or category, and then string text. and this is going to be the search text. So we'll have a category and we'll have a search text, and instead of just calling this a category, I'll call this search category, so the same name as here, just to make it a bit more compliant with the way we're coding our application. Once that is done, what I'm going to do is that inside of this function, I'm just going to say that I'm going to return main page data. But this time what I'm going to do is that I'm going to take the movies and I'm going to, if we get the movies, then I'm going to return those movies. And if that is not the case, then I'm going to do this dot movies. And similar to this, I'll add the semicolon here and then move on, and then I'll do a page. And if we get a page in the function, then I'll give it that new page. And if that is not the case, then we'll just maintain the previous state of whatever page we were on. Similar to this, search category would be as well, where inside of our search category, we'll have our category. And I don't know why it's not working. Oh yeah, it's called search category. And if the search category is not given to us, then I'll just do this dot search category. So this is a way of, so this function is a way for us to actually take some data and change it in the class without changing some other data, so that we can maintain the state of the class and just change the data that we require. And then finally search text as well. And in search text, we are going to do search text. And else if search text isn't given to us, then we'll just do the search that was previously available. And I know this function might be confusing, but once we actually come to using it, I'll explain it again. And with this, we are actually done with our main page data class. So what our main page data class does is that it models the data that we require for our main page UI. It has a constructor. It has another constructor called the initial constructor, which kind of provides us the default state of the class that the class should be in. Whereas we have an empty list of movies where at the first page, our search category has been defaulted to popular and there's nothing in the search bar. And finally, we have our copy with function, which takes in some parameters, all of which are optional. Whatever parameter is provided, it returns to us a new instance of the main page data class with the new parameter, with the new data that was provided for whatever attribute that we have inside of our class. And if for one attribute we do not get any data provided to us, then it just maintains the state of the attribute to whatever was previously in the class. So with that, I think this video has been quite long. I'm going to end this video here, and I'm going to see you guys in the next video, where we're actually going to be implementing some functionality for our main page data controller, which is going to be the actual business logic for our class, and which the UI is going to link to and like call operations on. So with that, I'm going to end this video here, and I'm going to see you guys in the next one. Thank you for watching. Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video, we're going to be creating the controller that is going to be responsible for actually providing data to our class and maintaining the state for our class, as well as providing us functions that our UI can interact with to actually call upon change in the UI. So with that said, let's get into it and let's see how to accomplish this task. So inside of my controller folders, which was created in the previous video, I'm going to create a new file, and I'll call this file main_page_data_controller. And then .dart. Once this is done, the next thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to create the class. So I'll call this class main page data controller. And this class is going to extend a thing known as a state notifier. And where does the state notifier come from? Well, it comes from the package, which is Flutter River Pod. So we got to import that package as well. I'm going to do import and then do Flutter_river pod dot and dart, and not actually dart or the Flutter River pod like this, and we should be good. Then I'm just going to continue where I left off by doing extend state notifier. And what is the state notifier going to be type of? Well, the state that we need to maintain inside of the state notifier is going to be the class that we had created in the previous video. So let's get that model imported in. So I'm going to do import /models/ and then main page data .dart. And the beauty of Riverpod is now going to become apparent to you as you get closer to accomplishing our task. So I'm going to call this main page data. And then inside of here, what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to open my class up, ready to define things inside of it. So the first thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to define the constructor for my class, and that's going to be a pretty simple constructor. And what this constructor is going to do is that it's going to take in a state, which might be optional. And that's why it's inside of these square brackets. And I'm going to call this state. So state. And then I'm going to add the remaining square bracket. And once we have this, then what it's going to do is that it's going to call the super classes constructor method, where it's going to pass the state. And if the state is not given to us for some reason, then we'll just use the default state. And where do I get the default state from? Well, we got to give it some other state. If we don't provide a state to the main page data controller, it needs to get the state from somewhere else, obviously. And where do we get this from? Well, we just use the constructor that we had for main page data.initial to just provide like the initial bare bones state. And once that is done, what I'm going to do is that inside of my constructor, I'm going to call the get movies function. So I'm going to call an operation which will tell, oh, go get movies now. Okay, so now that is done. To get movies, we need a really important thing, and that is our movie service. So I'm going to do movie service, and then inside of here, I'm going to do movie service is equals to get it dot instance. So now you're going to say, oh, we need get it as well, so we got to import that as well. So yeah, I'm going to do that now. So I'm going to go to the top, and I'll do get underscore it dot dart, and I'm going to import the get it packet. And then once I have the get it packet imported, I'm going to do instance dot get. What do I have to get? I have to get the actual movie service, so I'm going to have to import the service as well. So I'm going to do services, and then I'm going to do import dot slash services slash movie underscore service dot dart. And then I'm going to define the movie service here, and then we are good. Once we have this, the next thing we're going to be doing is that we're going to be defining the actual function for getting the movies. So I'm going to, for now, say that this is going to be a function that is going to return a future, and we're going to call it void, and we'll call it get movies. Because getting movies is an asynchronous operation, that's why we're saying that this function is going to return a future, but that future is going to be nothing. And then inside of here, I'm going to have a try catch statement. And inside of my try statement, what I'll do is that I'll try to get a list of movie. So I'm going to do movie equals to underscore movies, and then I'll do this. And then I have to import the movie model as well. So I'm going to go to the top, and I'll do import dot slash models slash movie dot dart. And what I'm going to do now is that I am going to, just for now, do underscore movies is equals to, and I'm going to do await, and then I'm going to do movie service dot, and we do not have a function actually right now implemented inside of our movie service to actually get some movies. So what I'm going to do is that I am going to go to our movie service now, and I'm going to be implementing a function inside of here that is going to allow us to actually get a movie. So the function that we're going to be implementing right now is for getting popular movies. So I'm going to do a function which is going to be a future, and the future will return a list of movie. So I have to get the movie model again. So I'm going to do slash as models, and then I'm going to do import dot slash models slash movie dot dart. And then here what I'm going to do is that I'm going to say get popular movie. And then I am going to say that this will get a argument called page, which is a named argument. That's why inside of curly brackets. And then we're going to perform some magic inside of here. So we are going to get a response. And the response is a data type that is returned to us every time we use the HTTP service and use the get method on it. And I'm going to say that this is going to be response, and then I'm going to do await. So we're going to await the HTTP dot and then get function. So what are we going to get? Well, we're going to get slash movie slash popular. And then I'm going to pass in a query. And the query is just going to be really simple. It's going to detail as to what result page do we need to retrieve. And the page is just going to be the page that gets passed in. I'm going to add the comma, and then I'll add a semicolon here. And then now I need to import the actual response as well. And where do we get the response class from? Well, it's actually given to us by getIt, so I'm going to do getIt.dart. or not get it, sorry, it's not get it, it's the actual package we use for our web request, and that is deal. And I had the semicolon as well. So now that we have defined this, the next thing we're going to do is that we're just going to check if our underscore response dot status code is equals to 200. That means the request was successfully served. Then we're going to have this map, which we'll call data, and we'll take underscore response dot data. Once we have that, we are going to create a list of movies from that data, and we're going to save that inside of a movies variable. And the way we're going to do that is when we're going to take the data, we're going to take the results key, we'll take that key's value, which is going to be a list of list of movies, and for each movie we'll map it to a new instance of a movie. And then inside of here, the actual map function, we're going to get the movie data, and we are going to return a new instance of a movie. So we're going to do return movie dot from JSON. Remember the function we had coded much earlier in the course, and we're going to take the movie data and we're going to pass it in for the JSON and do Alt-Shift-F, Command save. So now that we have the list of movies, we're going to do toList. And then finally, the last thing that we're going to do is that we're going to return the underscore movies, and it's giving me an error. Oh yeah, I don't need to add these. And then finally, the last thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to have this else statement where if the request is not successful, I'm going to throw an exception, and inside of the exception, I'm just going to paste in this error, which is going to be couldn't load latest movies. And shouldn't call it latest, could call it popular actually, and do Command save. I'm going to go back to our actual main page data controller to go back to where we're getting a movie, and we're going to do movie service.get popular movies, right? And then now we have to pass to our actual get popular movies function the state. Where we're going to get the state? Well, that was maintained. And how do we access the state inside of a class that extends a state notifier? Well, we know that we can use the state variable for that, and we know that our state is going to be of type main page data. So inside of that, I'm going to do page. And we can also successfully say that our page is going to have some value just based on the fact that when our constructor is initialized, we either get a state passed to us, and in that way, in that case, we just maintain that state inside of our main page data controller class. And if that is not the case, then we just have this dummy initial state that gets maintained inside of the class as the state. So with this, I'm going to do Command save, or I'm going to end this video here because it's been quite a long video. And in the next video, we're going to see how to take this bare minimum code that we've written and kind of link it up with our UI and see the data actually loading in. So with that, I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you for watching. Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video, we're going to be taking the bare minimum amount of functionality that we have inside of our main page data class and trying to link the functionality we have to our actual UI and kind of see the magic happen where we load some data from our API. So let's get into it and let's see how to do that. So we're going to hop on over to our main page now, which is, let me see, it's here. And inside of here, what I'm going to do is that I am going to start building up the logic to allow us to use riverplot. So the first thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to make sure that my Flutter riverplot package is imported. And once that is done, on top of the class, I'm going to define this new, you can call it provider. And this provider is going to be the provider that is going to provide us with the controller. And what is this controller going to be called? Well, I'm just going to be calling this controller our main page data controller provider. So pretty lengthy name. And what is this main page data controller provider going to be equal to? Well, it's going to be equal to a state notifier provider. The state notifier provider has to provide us a state of type main page data controller. So I have to import the main page data controller class as well, which Flutter so kindly did for me, but I'm just doing this manually just so that if you guys ever go to GitHub and you take a look at this code, everything's really easy for you to see and associate yourself with. And then I'm going to call this main, and it's not the model actual, it's the controller. So I have to create a new statement here and call this controllers, and then import the /controllers / main page data controller dart. And then the state notifier provider is going to provide us a main page data controller. And inside of here, we'll define this function, which will be responsible for returning our main page data controller. And with this, I'm going to add the semicolon here, not inside the brackets, but actually outside. And I do not know why I'm having a difficult time doing that. I'm going to do Alt-Shift-F, Command save, kind of come back to the same situation. We're good to go. So now that we've defined our actual provider, we have to now access it inside of our class. For that, what we're going to be doing is that we are going to be going and we're going to be creating two new variables inside of our class. One is going to be the main page data controller, which is going to be holding a reference to our main page data controller. And then we'll have a main page data as well. And this is going to hold the information regarding our main page data that resides inside of our main page data controller. And it'll make sense, just keep tagging along. Then inside of our build function, what we're going to be doing is that we are going to be taking our _main page data controller, and we are going to be using the watch function that is provided to us by Riverpod. And we're going to be saying that what do you have to watch? And we're going to say, well, you have to watch the main page data controller provider. And then apart from that, the next thing that we're going to do is that we're going to have our main page data. And for this variable, we're going to say that you got to watch the main page controller provider. So main page data controller provider dot state, and then do command save. And it's giving me an error saying that DO is giving me an error. Let me see what the error is. Let me just restart the application. And it's still giving me an error. Hello everyone, so welcome back. I finally figured the issue that we were having, and that was a really small issue, a small oversight that we had made while we were copying the actual base API URL. And the base API URL needs to be, let me remove this, not www.themoviedb.org/3, but actually api.themoviedb.org/3. So just double check what the actual base API URL is, save the main.json file again, and then just reload the application or stop the simulator and rebuild it, and you're going to be on your way again. So with this, what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to go back to our actual HTTP service class where I added some print statements, and I'm just going to remove these print statements. And I'm going to rebuild my application. And I'm going to head on over back to where we had left off our development. Okay, so now that we're back at our point where we had left off, where we had defined these two variables inside of our build function, main page data controller, main page data, and we were setting them equal to a function that is going to watch the main page data controller provider. And every time something changes inside of the main page data controller provider, it'll reflect and it'll update that value inside of here. And then variable that we have was the main page data variable, which was going to have the functionality where we would have this watch function, where this watch function would watch the main page data controller provider's state, and every time that state would change, it would take that new state and put it inside of our main page data. So now that we have this, what we can do is that we can actually go down and we have to go down to where we have our actual movies list view widget. So I'm going to go down to where we have our movies list view widget. And as you can see, we have this list of movies that we are creating. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to remove this empty, and I'm going to say that this list of movies is going to be equal to main page data.movies. And then I'm going to take this block of code for the for loop. I'm going to comment this. I'm going to command save. And let's just see if this actually works. Okay, so now all of you might be wondering, well, we're getting the movies there seemed to be an error where Dua told us that something was wrong. So we do know that we're interacting with the API. We do have a function that's getting movies, but like nothing's getting updated. What's the problem behind that? And well, the problem behind that is that we are not actually updating the state, if you remember correctly. And a lot of people would be like, how? And that is because if you go to our get movies function, you're going to see that it just returns a void future. So if this function doesn't return movies, how do we take the movies and then like do something with them? Well, what we're going to actually be doing is that we're going to be updating the state inside of our class. So inside of our state notifier, we're going to be updating the state. And what we're going to be updating the state to, well, we're just going to take the state that we have, and then we're going to do the copy with function. And I'm going to stop the debugging for now. And then inside of this copy with function, what we're going to do is that we're going to take the movies and we're going to set them equal to. And what are we going to set them equal to? Well, we're going to take the already existing movies inside of our state. So I'm going to do state dot movies, and we'll combine this with the new movies that we have gotten by doing underscore movies. And then moving onwards, we'll do the same thing for the page as well, where the page is going to be state dot page +1, because now we've retrieved the result for some movies from the first page. So now we can update the page as well. And then with this, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to remove the search category and the search text, add in semicolon here. And the copy with function suggests to me that if I hover over it, that it requires 4 positional arguments, but has found 0. And the reason behind that is that our actual copy with function lists all of these arguments as required arguments. I'm going to put them inside of curly brackets so that these becomes named optional arguments. I'm going to do command save. I'm going to do command save here. I'm going to now run my application. And once the application actually starts to run on the simulator, fingers crossed, we should see the initial results for our movies actually load up. And the app is going to be buggy because we've not implemented the functionality completely regarding pagination and other things like that. But hopefully, fingers crossed, we should see some kind of result actually pop on our screen. So I'm going to pause this video here. I'm going to wait for the application to actually launch, and then we'll continue from there. Okay, so I'm back, and as you can see, we are actually displaying results on our screen. So how does this process work? Let's just get into it. I'm going to remove this block, and I'm going to tell you what goes on. So what we do is that we define a provider on top, and this provider is responsible for actually updating us regarding the state of our main page data controller. Our main page data controller is a class that extends state notifier, and every time that something changes inside of the state, it updates us. And that update then gets reflected and the UI gets rebuilt. How does the state get changed? Well, we do that here, as you can see. When inside of our get movies function, once we've done all of the processing and we're ready to update the state, we change the state by setting the state equal to something new. And in our case, we do the state.copy with function, and whatever new data that we want to change in the state, which in this case are the movies because we've gotten some new movies, and as well as the page number because we've already taken the results out for the page number that was currently in the state, and then we increment that by 1, and then we return a new instance of the main page data class in the copy with function, as you can see here, and then that gets set equal as the state. And now the state gets updated. When the state gets updated, you're going to remember that we have these 2 variables that are keeping an eye on the actual state or the data that's inside of the classes. One of the variable keeps an eye on the main page data controller provider, so it keeps information regarding the main page data controller, and the other variable, which is the main page data variable, well, it keeps an eye on the main page data controller's provider's state. So the actual class inside of it, which is being maintained, which is the main page data class, and it's keeping an eye on that and checking for changes on that. And now once here the state gets updated or something else happens inside of the main page data controller, such as a function call, which might instantiate state change, these values inside of here change, and then accordingly the widgets get rebuilt, and the new values are then accessed through the variables, as you can see here, where we just do main page data.movies, and that gives us the result of the movies. And now you might say, like, how does Flutter know that a rebuild happened or the state change inside of a notifier, even though we're just using a watch function? And well, the reason for that is because if you go to your actual main.dart file, you're going to see that we actually wrap our material or our application inside of a provider scope, as you can see here. And this provider scope is what does all of the magic and under the hood processing. So now that this is done, I'm going to end this video here, and I'm going to see you guys in the next video, where we're just going to be now working and tweaking the functionality for our API, adding more functionality, as well as refining the interface. So with that, I'm going to see you guys in the next one. Thank you for watching. Hello everyone, welcome back. In the previous video, we had linked up our main page UI to our main page data controller in a way that now when the movies data was being received, the actual data that we were receiving was being displayed on the UI as well, as you can see here. But there's still a lot of functionality that needs to be implemented before we can call this UI actually fully functioning. In this video right now, what we're going to be doing is that we're going to be handling the actual operation of changing the search categories for popular and upcoming, and then kind of building in the logic so that when we select upcoming, it displays us the upcoming movies and popular and things like that. So without anything further to do, let's get into it and let's see how we can achieve this. So the first thing that we need to do is that inside of our movie services or movie service file, we need to implement the actual function, which is going to allow us to get upcoming movies. And the function is going to be really similar to our function for actually getting popular movies. And the only main difference that I can tell you as of now is going to be the actual endpoint that we're going to be hitting for getting the upcoming movies. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to copy the function and I'm going to paste it in again. So I'm just duplicating the get popular movies function inside of our movie service. And then instead of naming it get popular movies, I'm going to name it get upcoming movies. Then the actual inputs are going to remain the same for the actual response, where we do the http.get request. Instead of sending a request to /movie/popular, we're going to send a request to /movie/upcoming. The query is going to remain the same, and then the logic for actually getting the data, parsing the movies, returning movie instances, making them a list, and returning is going to be the same. And I'll do command save now. The next thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to our main page data controller now. And inside of our main page data controller, I'm going to be creating a new function. And this new function is going to be responsible for actually updating our category of the movies that we're watching. So what I'm going to do is that I'll call this function void, so it's going to return nothing, and I'm going to call this update search category. And then what I'm going to say that it's going to get a string as its input, which is the category that we want to update the search to. Then what we're going to do is that we're going to have a try catch block. In the catch block, I'm just going to do one thing, and that is going to be that I'm just going to print the error that we get. And inside of the try block, we're going to do all of our actual magic. So now that we've received the new category, I want to update the state, because the state is what actually stores the actual information regarding what currently is being displayed on screen. And the state is of type main page data, and if in main page data you can see that we have a string, the search category, so I've got to update that. But I've also got to maintain the state of all of the other attributes that we have. So to do that, I'll again use my state.copyWidth function, and now this time in copywidth I'm going to be updating everything, because I'm going to be updating the movies to be an empty list. I'm going to be setting the page to 1 because we've changed our category, so now we've got to reset everything. So we've got to reset our movies and make them empty. I've got to reset my page to 1. I've got to update my category to the category that gets passed in. And then finally, the last thing is going to be the search text, and I got to make the search text be empty. Then I'm going to do the semicolon, and that's pretty much what we have to do. But if we just leave the update search category at this point, then what's going to happen that the state is going to actually update, but the actual movies are not going to be pulled. So what do we have to do? Well, it's pretty simple. All we have to do is get the get movies function and call it. So now we're updating the state. We're telling it to update the category and reset everything else. And then we're doing the get movies function again. And then the get movies function would go and get the movies. And now what we can do is that we can head on over back to our main page. So I'm going to open that up. And it's not main page data, it's actually main page. And there what we're going to be doing is that we're going to be going down to where we have our category selection widget. So I'm going to close the terminal and I'm going to go to my category selection widget. And inside of our category selection widget, you're going to see that we have this Unchanged callback function, which tells us every time we select a new drop-down menu item. Here what I'm going to do is that I'm going to take the value that gets given to us, and instead of using a function body, I'm going to use an arrow function. And I'm going to say that if the value dot toString is not empty, so if the value that we select is not an empty value, then what I want to do is that I want to take my main page data controller and I want to update the search category and I want to pass in the value that we get to it. And if that is not the case, then I'm just going to do null. So I'm going to do nothing, and I'll just do Alt-Shift-F command save. I'm going to update and I'm going to reload our application just to make sure that everything works. And now if I click on our actual popular to upcoming movies, you're going to see that our UI actually gets updated because you can see that there's a slight delay where we actually like update the UI and the movies disappear and appear. But you're going to see that the actual text doesn't change for like what menu item has been selected. And that's because we're not changing the value at all for the drop-down menu button. And we need to get this value. How are we going to get with value? Well, we're just going to take the main page data and then we're going to do search category. So now it says that instead of having that static category that we've said, what you have to do is that you have to look inside main page data and you have to get the search category from there. And as soon as I do this, you're going to see that the category updates as well. So now if I click on upcoming, we're going to select upcoming. If I click on popular, we select popular. And if I select the empty thing, then nothing happens. And that is because we've made a check here to make sure that we don't select an empty value. Okay, so that looks all good. But you're going to see that even if we select upcoming, the movies don't change. And what's the problem for that? Well, the problem with that is that even though our update search category function is working, it's updating the state and it's calling get movies, we're not actually changing which endpoint we hit for our movie service to get the movies from. And we've got to now bake the logic inside of our function to actually handle the searching of the categories. So it's pretty simple to do. What I'm going to do is that after the empty movies list that I initialize, I'm going to create an if block. And then in this if clause, I'm going to say if our state, which is of type main page data, search category is empty, or not search category, sorry, search text is empty, that means that we're not performing a text-based search, then we can go into this block. And inside of here, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to say that if the state dot search category is equals to search category and then dot popular, then what I'm going to do is that I am going to call this line of code, which is movies equals to await movie service that get popular movies. And else if, and it needs to be small, else if our state dot search category is equals to search category dot upcoming, that we need to get upcoming movies, then we're going to use the same line of code, but we're not going to use the actual get popular movies endpoint. We're going to do get upcoming movies endpoint, and I'm going to remove these additional brackets at end. And finally, we'll have just a safe check where we'll do else if our state dot search category is equals to search category dot none. So search category dot none. Then what we're going to do is that we're just going to set our movies to an empty list. And finally, after this, the last thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to add an else statement here for the outermost if statement to check if our search text is empty. And if our search text is not empty, then I'm just going to add a comment here where I'll do perform text search for now. and we'll come back to this later. And then once that is done, then what we're going to do is that we're going to remove this line of code, because now we're handling the movie getting logic inside of this if statement. And at the end, I'm just going to put in the actual code for updating our state once we have the movies. And then I'm going to print the error in the catch block. And I'll do Alt-Shift-F command, save. And now what I'm going to do is that I'll reload my simulator to get a fresh start. But before we actually get going with testing our UI, I'm going to go to our main page and I'm going to go to our build function. I'm going to tell you that where do we get this watch function from, because I remembered that I actually forgot to explain this. Well, if you remember, we wrapped our application inside of a scoped reader. If you go to our main.dart file, you're going to see that our my app is wrapped inside of a provider scope widget. This provider scope is provided to us by Flutter Riverpod. And secondly, our actual main page file extends a consumer widget. This consumer widget allows us to have access to a scoped reader inside of our build method. And this scoped reader is what I have named watch. And what this reader allows us to do is that it allows us to monitor the values for whatever provider we pass in. So I'm monitoring the value for main page data controller provider, as well as the state that this main page data controller provider is providing. And then every time that these states changes, something happens inside of these where the data changes, then what the watch function does is that it automatically updates the values inside of the main page data controller and the main page data as well. And that's all the magic that watch does. So now with watch explained, I'm going to actually click on my movie selection and I'm going to click on upcoming. And hopefully we should now grab upcoming movies. As we've seen, now we've grabbed upcoming movies as well. And I can scroll down and you're going to see that we go to the end and we just grab up to like the some first page movies, the first page movie results that we get, but we're not getting anything else. And now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to end this video here and I'm going to see you guys in the next video where we'll continue developing the functionality of our main page UI. So thank you for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video, we're going to be implementing search functionality inside of our UI so that we can actually search movies and then display corresponding results for them inside of our list view. So without anything further to do, let's get into it and let's see how to do this. So to get started, we'll go back to our actual movie service class. And inside of our movie service class, we're going to be implementing the method, which is going to be responsible for actually sending the search request to our actual API. And the way we're going to do this is that I'm going to copy the get upcoming movies function because our function is going to be really similar. And instead of calling it get upcoming movies, I'm going to call search movies. And then what I'm going to do is that instead of getting a page passed in as an optional parameter, I'll add a required parameter to the actual function as well. And that is going to be the actual search term that we are going to search the database upon. And I'll add this and now we're good to go. Now that we have this defined, the next thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to the actual get method that we're sending the request. And instead of sending a request to /movie/upcoming, I'm going to send a request to /search/movie. And then again, if you want to learn anything regarding to what type of data does this endpoint provide us or what other endpoints are there for us to interact with, don't forget to go to the dmoviedb.org's documentation for the developers. They have a fantastic documentation and it'll answer all of your questions. With that said, the next thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to add an additional parameter to our query as well. And that parameter is going to be the actual search term. And the search term is called query. And then to the query, the value is going to be search term. With this, I'm going to do Alt-Shift-F command, save, and the rest of the code needs to remain the same. Nothing needs to change. All I'm going to do is that I'm going to rename the actual exception or write the exception comments that we, or the exception outputs that we get. And instead of saying couldn't load popular movies, I'm going to say couldn't perform movie search. So I'm going to say couldn't perform search, movie search actually, movies search. And then similar to this, instead of saying couldn't load popular movies for the get upcoming movies, I'll say couldn't load upcoming movies. With this done, what we're going to do is that we're going to go back to our main page data controller. And inside of our main page data controller, we're going to be implementing the function that is going to be responsible for updating our search to be used as a text search. So I'll create another function, and I'll call this void, and I'll call this update text search. And then I'm going to say that this is also going to get a string, which is going to be the search text. And then inside of here, I'm going to have a try catch block. So try catch block. And inside of the catch block, I'm just going to print the error. And then inside of the try block, I'm going to do the same thing that I've done previously, where I'll update the state by doing state dot copy with function, and I'm going to set the movies to be empty because again we're doing a new search, so we gotta update the movies. I'm gonna set the page to 1. I'm gonna set the search category to none actually, so search category dot none. And then finally I'll search the search text to the actual search text that gets passed in. And once we're done with that, the last thing that I'm going to do is similar to what we did in our update search category function. I'll call the get movies function because we got to get movies again. I'm going to do command save. Now with this done, I'm going to move on to our get movies function. And inside of get movies function, I'm going to be implementing the logic for actually getting the movies if our search text is not empty. So inside of this else block, I'll remove this comment and I'll say movies is equals to, and then I'm going to do await underscore movie service dot, and I'm going to say search movies, and I'm going to pass in the search term. And where do we get the search term from? Well, we're going to do state dot search text. I'm going to add the trailing semicolon, do Alt Shift F, command save, and we are good to go. So now that the last thing we need to do is that we got to link our logic up to our actual text field. For that, I'll go to our main page. And once I'm at my main page, I'm going to go to the actual widget that is going to be our text field. So that's going to be our search field widget. And inside of our search field widget, we got to change some things. Firstly, we've got to make sure that our input, once we have an input, is given to our actual main page data controller dot update text search function. So main page data controller dot update text search function, and I'm going to pass in the input. And then secondly, the last thing that we need to do is that we have to make sure that this works. So I'm going to now reload our application. I'm going to go to our search. I'm going to type in wonder. I'm going to press enter, and you're going to see that our search text actually works. But you're seeing that the search value is not being maintained, and we need to do that. To reflect the actual text that we actually performed the search on inside of our search text field, what we can do is that we can go to the top to our build function, and we need to update the value of the actual search text field controller. And we're going to be doing this inside of our build function after we actually define our text editing controller, because this build function is going to be called on every update of the state due to the magic of provider. And here we're going to say that the search text field controller dot, and then we're going to say text is going to be equal to our main page data, and then dot, and we're going to say search text. With this, I'm going to do Alt Shift F, command save, and you're going to see that now it gets updated and is shown. So I'm just going to reload the application and make sure that it's shown again. And now if I type in, for example, mission, and press enter, you're going to see that not only does our text field actually show what the actual value is, but our category selection field is also empty, and we can see all of the movies. And now if I actually go click here and I select popular, you're going to see that our search text gets removed and we just see popular movies. And then if we click on upcoming, the same thing, and we can search as well. So with that, I'm going to end this video here, and I'm going to see you guys in the next one, where we're going to be implementing pagination inside of our application. So thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video, we're going to be working towards actually implementing pagination in our application, because as of now, even though we're pulling results, if we scroll down to the end of our list, you're going to see that we just hit a dead end and no data is loaded. So what we'd like to change is that we'd like to implement a way of kind of notifying our main page data controller that, hey, I've reached the end of my actual list and I want you to go grab some more data. So let's get back into the code and let's see how we can achieve this kind of functionality. So to get started, what we'll do is that we'll head on over to our main page Dart file, and we're going to go down to where we have our actual list view. So I'm going to go to our movies list view widget. Now here, what we're going to be doing is that I'm going to be copying this function, which is going to be responsible for returning our list view.builder. And instead of this, we are going to be returning a notification listener. So I'm going to copy my list view.builder function and all of its contents. I'm going to create a notification listener widget. And for the child of this widget, I'm going to be actually adding our list view builder. I'm going to be removing the semicolon. I'm going to be adding it here. I'm going to be adding the trailing commas to aid the reformatting of the code and do command save. With this, I'm going to be going to the notification listener, and inside of the notification listener, I'm going to be using this notification function that we have, which is onNotification. And this onNotification function is going to give us an onScroll notification. So I'm going to just call this onScroll notification, and we'll use this onScroll notification to actually code up the logic for actually determining if we've reached the end of our list. And if we have, then updating our main data controller to get more movies. If you hover over the onNotification function, it tells you that it gives us an input of notification type. And where does this get this data from? Well, whatever child it is, it sees for notifications on it. So since the notification listener in our case has the child, which is a list view, it's going to see updates and notify us for the scroll events that happen on it. Now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to do if our onScroll notification is a scroll end notification. So if it is a scroll end notification, then we're going to be doing something. But if it's not, then I'm just going to return a false at the end, because this function expects us to return a Boolean. Next thing we're going to be doing is that inside of our if statement, we're going to be doing final, and we'll call this before. So what the before extent was, and I'm going to do onScroll notification dot metrics dot extent. And what extent is it going to be? It's going to be extent before. Similar to this, we'll have another statement, and we'll call this after, or max, we can say, not after, and we'll call this onScroll notification dot metrics dot extent, or we're just going to call it max scroll extent. And this max scroll extent tells us the maximum amount that we can scroll to, and before tells us the current scroll point that we're at. Then what we're going to do is that we're going to see if our before is equals to our maximum. That means that we've reached the end of our list. Then we're going to be doing our main page data controller dot and then get movies. And if that is not the case, then we're going to be returning false. And we first return true in this if statement. And if that is not the case, then outside of this if statement, we'll return false. We'll do Alt-Shift-F command save. We'll reload our application. And we'll go to the list and we'll scroll down to the end. And as soon as we reach the end, you're going to see that new data starts to be pulled. So I'll scroll down fast and you're going to see we reach the end and then new data is loaded. So with that, we've successfully implemented pagination. But the cool thing about the way we implemented all of the functionality is that now if I go and change our actual category to be upcoming, let's just say, you're going to see that pagination still works and we can go to the end and it'll pull new data. And same happens for the actual search as well, where if I do mission, everything gets reset, we see some new results, and if we scroll to the end, we pull some new data. So with that, I'm going to end this video here, and I'm going to see you guys in the next video. And in the next video, we're going to be looking to how can we implement the functionality inside of a UI where if we click on each movie, then the background changes. So with that, I'm going to see you guys in the next one. Thank you for watching. Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video, we're going to be implementing functionality inside of our application that is going to allow us to update the background image for whenever we click on a movie tile. So without anything further to do, let's get into it and let's see how we can achieve this functionality. So to get started, what I'll do is that I'll go to the top and I'm going to go to where we're defining our actual main page data controller provider for our main page. Inside of our main page class, I'm going to create a new provider. This provider is going to be responsible for actually maintaining the state of whatever currently image is being displayed and actually the URL of that image, and then kind of like rebuilding the UI if that URL gets updated. I'll call this provider selected movie poster URL provider. So provider, and then this provider is going to be equal to state provider. So just give me 1 second. State provider, and this state provider is going to keep a state of type string. So it's going to maintain the state of a string. And then inside of this function, we're going to take the reference, and then we are going to be then defining what happens for this provider and what type of value it returns. So I'm going to add the semicolon at the end, and now we're ready to get going. Inside of this provider, we are going to have a movies variable, which is going to have access to the movies. And how will we access the movies? Well, this reference variable that gets passed in allows us to have access to the watch function. And the same way that we were watching for changes inside of our build function to the main page data controller provider, we'll watch for changes here as well. So I'll call this our watch main page data controller provider dot state. And now that this is done, I am going to add the remaining bracket and we can move forwards. And finally, what we're going to do is that we're going to return movies.length. And if the movies.length is not equal to 0, then what we're going to be doing is that we're going to be returning our movies 0.poster URL. And if that is not the case, then we'll return null. And we are getting an error, and the error is because inside of our movies, we're not actually saving the movies, we're actually saving the state of our main page data controller provider, which is of type main page data. So we have to do .movies here, and now we are good to go. So with this, I'm going to do command save. And some of you might ask the question, why are we doing this very specific thing inside of our state provider's function where it's responsible for providing us a string for what movie or what poster URL should it show? Well, the reason for that is because when this actual state provider gets initialized, we need to have like a default value. And where will we get that default value from? Well, in my logic, what I said was that if we're going to go take the movies, and for whatever the first movie is being displayed, we'll take its poster URL and we'll set that as the initial value of our state provider. And then that will at least take care of having an initial value for our selected movie poster URL provider. So now that this is done, I'm going to go back to our build. I'm going to go back to our main page, and inside of our main page, I'm going to create a new variable, and this variable is going to be responsible for storing the poster URL to be displayed for the background image. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to create a string, and I'm going to call the string selected movie poster URL. And then I'm going to go down to our build function, and inside of our build function, I'm going to go to where we're getting the actual data regarding our main page data controller provider, as well as the main page data. And I'm going to here say that the selected movie poster URL is going to be equal to, and what is it going to be equal to? Well, it's going to be equal to watch. And what is going to watch? Well, it's going to watch our new provider that we had created, which is selected movie poster URL provider. And with this, we can do .state at the end, and we are good to go. So I'm going to do command save, and we're going to get an error. And the error is because it doesn't know what the type of the state is. So I'm going to go up to where we have our actual selected movie poster URL, and I'm going to change the type to be a variable. And that should hopefully fix our problem, but it's giving me an error for the state. Oh, yes, I need to remove it and do command save. So now that we're getting the selected movie poster URL, we are going to go to our background widget function, and instead of grabbing this hard-coded value, what we're going to do is that we're going to do selected movie poster URL as the address for our network image to pull the image from. We'll do command save, and we're getting an error. And let's see what the error is. And it says the straight controller string is not a subtype of string. And the problem was a small oversight I made, and that was that for the selected movie poster URL, because it's been holding a reference to our actual provider, we have to access the state, and the state is of type string, and that's where the actual URL is kept. So we'll do command save now, and you're going to see that the actual value is going to be updated. But you're going to see that we get this error when our application gets loaded, where it says that it doesn't have a default value, as you can see. To fix this issue, we'll go to the top of our function. We'll create an if statement, and we'll say selected movie poster URL.state. If it's not equal to null, then what we want is that we want to return this container. And if it is null, then in that case, what we're going to be doing is that we're going to be returning an empty black container with the height and width of the device. So I'm just going to add this, do Alt-Shift-F command save. And now if we reload our application, you're going to see that we don't get that error. And when the actual image is available and the movies have been loaded, we display that image. But still, you can see that we're not actually updating the image once we click on the movie tile. And the last thing that we need to do is that inside of our actual movies list view widget function, we have to, inside of our list view, go to the point where we have our gesture detector inside of the item builder function. And on the onTap function, we need to actually update the value of our selected movie poster URL. So what I'm going to do here, that when the actual tile gets tapped, we're going to do selected movie poster URL and we'll update its state. And we'll update its state to what? Well, we'll do movies underscore count dot and then poster URL. Remember that we don't need the poster path, we need the complete URL. Do command save, reload our application. Fingers crossed the functionality should work now. And now if we click on one of the movie tiles, you're going to see that the image gets updated to the new one. So with that, I'm going to end this video here, and I'm going to see you guys in the next one. Hopefully you've enjoyed building the application thus far. Thank you for watching. Welcome back. Congratulations on completing the course on building a RESTful application using Flutter and RiverPod. In this course, we looked at the core concepts when it comes to REST API development, such as managing state, authentication, pagination, as well as creating a stunning UI and dynamically changing data. I hope that you've gained some kind of value from this course.